Year 3052 of the new era, you have entered the Hades sector of the Federation. Approaching Central Command. Assistant Vance, you're 0.023 seconds late. Try to be more punctual next time. Alara Vance responded firmly, Yes, sir. Commander Kian continued, What's on the schedule today? Alara replied, her tone serious. At 9:30, you have a strategy meeting at Central Command. At 14 hours, you'll return to Federation headquarters to meet with the President. And at 19 hours, you'll accompany the President to the Interplanetary Gala. Kian turned to her, a hint of confusion in his eyes. A gala? Yes, sir, Alara confirmed immediately. I've already selected your attire for tonight. I've also arranged for an emergency alert to be sent to you at 19:30, requesting your immediate return to Central Command. Kian kept his expression neutral. Well done. With a practiced motion, Alara pulled out a chair for him. It's 9 now. You have 15 minutes to eat. As Kian ate, he noticed a rookie approaching with a bowl of tomatoes. His eyes narrowed, cold and piercing, staring daggers at the rookie. The rookie froze, utterly terrified. Oh God, that look is terrifying. What did I do wrong? Alara swiftly removed the bowl of tomatoes. Didn't you pay attention during orientation? Remember this. The commander doesn't eat tomatoes. Go, now. Yes, ma'am, the rookie stammered, thinking to herself. Thank God for Assistant Vance. The rookie bolted from the room. Just then, alarms blared throughout the command center. Alert! Alert! Abyssal fleet attacking! Alert! Alert! Abyssal fleet attacking! Kian threw on his coat without hesitation. Push today's schedule back by 2 hours. Notify the fleet. We deploy in 2 minutes. Yes, sir, Alara responded. Warship EC-0120 has been alerted and is standing by. Deploy. Sometime later, Alara was at the medical bay tending to the wounded when Lieutenant Hayes rushed in, his face full of worry. Dr. Vance, we have an emergency. Please, come with me. Seeing the urgency in his eyes, Alara didn't ask questions. She handed off her duties to a colleague, then followed him to another ship. What's going on? Did the battle go badly? The lieutenant shook his head. No, we secured a decisive victory. But the commander? He was injured, saving my life. He's been unconscious since. I know his condition is unique. I didn't dare let anyone else near him, so I brought him to you. We're here. You should go in. I'll report our victory to Federation headquarters. Alara replied softly. Okay. And she stepped inside. Lieutenant Hayes wasn't being overly cautious. My boss isn't like other people. He's not just the strongest commander in the Federation, but also a succubus hybrid, forcibly cultivated in an incubator. The main reason I became Kian's sole medical officer and special assistant is because I was chosen by the research facility as a child to grow up alongside him. But after Kian was freed from the cultivation program, the president ordered his memories erased before sending him to the military academy. I never thought I'd see him again, but 2 years ago, the Federation sought me out to be his doctor. It made sense, I suppose. I know him better than anyone. After running a series of diagnostic tests, Alara prepared a specialized syringe. The moment the needle pierced his skin, the unconscious man's eyes snapped open. His pupils were deep and dangerous, like a predator locking onto prey, and they were fixed on her. Commander Kian? She said, trying to rouse him. In a split-second decision, she reached for the critical nerve cluster at the base of his neck, but his hand shot out, sharp claws clamping precisely onto the artery in her wrist. In the next moment, he pulled her into his arms, his other hand gripping her throat while staring into her eyes. Then she saw it, a faint glow emanating from the base of his horns. It was the sign of a succubus's volatile phase. Unfortunately, I walked right into his first heat. With her wrist pinned, she was helpless. She tried to speak. Commander, I'm Alara. Hearing her name, the pressure on her wrist eased slightly. He looked at her, his lips forming words. Lara. Cold sweat beaded on her forehead. That's right, it's me. I'm Alara. The next moment, a dangerous-looking succubus tail appeared from behind him. It was beautiful, with a small inverted triangle at the tip and a soft tuft of fur at the end. It swayed back and forth in front of her before coiling around her leg. He looked at her, his eyes glistening as he began to confess how much he'd missed her. Alara, I missed you so much. Don't ever leave me again, Alara. I want you by my side forever. Then he switched to full-on cuddle mode, nuzzling into her neck, rubbing against her like an affectionate pet. Alara was stunned. What is happening right now? I never imagined the handsome boy I grew up with could turn into this. Why aren't you looking at me? He whined, clinging to her like an insecure puppy. She had to summon all her willpower to separate the cold, composed Commander Kian from the emotionally volatile figure before her now. The word commander was on the tip of her tongue, but she risked a softer approach. Kian, she said gently, trying to calm him. I know. Can you let me go now, please? She tried to ease him off, but his tail only tightened around her arm. He looked at her with pleading eyes, his affection shifting into a stubborn demand. No, I'm not letting go. Then he kissed her hand. After years of studying succubus hybrids at the facility, Alara knew this was just one of their tricks to enchant humans. She tried to pry the tail off, but it was no use. If anything, it coiled even tighter around her wrist. Look at this! The ice-cold commander has turned into a clingy puppy who just wants to cuddle and kiss. How do you resist something like this? Defeated, Alara looked down at her trapped wrist, took a slow, deep breath, and tried to reason with him as calmly as possible. Come on now. I can't treat your injuries like this. Kian, can you stand up? But if I don't hold you, it hurts so much, he sobbed. His eyes red and thick lashes clumped with tears. He looked like he was about to throw himself into her arms recklessly. I feel awful. Can you kiss me? Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her. Alara froze. I'm done for. I'm so dead. Somebody save me. As her mind started to spin, she heard him whisper against her lips, Ellie, kiss me. Hearing the name Ellie, she went completely still. Did I hear that right? Kian's memories were supposed to be wiped clean by the Federation. Why is he calling me by my childhood nickname now? A small sound snapped her back to reality. In the few seconds she'd been lost in thought, Kian had started crying in earnest. Ellie, you're not paying attention to me today. Don't you like me anymore? No, that's not it. Faced with this version of her boss, Alara was utterly bewildered. She had no idea what to do. Tears suddenly streamed down his face. The bizarre sight jolted her out of her stunned state. After a moment, she reached out to wipe his cheeks, soothing him. Kian, come on now. Don't cry. I want a hug, he sobbed. To calm his spiraling emotions, she had no choice but to give in, wrapping her arms around him and patting his back gently. All right, I'm hugging you. No more crying. He could barely control his emotions. Okay, I'll be good. I won't cry anymore. He lowered his head, inching closer. Ellie, if you won't kiss me, I'll kiss you. Alara softly replied, okay, and Kian began kissing her, his sobs gradually subsiding. The kiss went on, until Alara felt breathless. She tried to push him away, but he was too strong, so she had no choice but to let it happen. When she came to her senses, his tail had slipped under her shirt. She slowly opened her eyes and found herself still trapped in his overwhelming embrace, struggling to breathe. Just this once, she thought. Just for tonight, I'll let this happen. Suddenly, she grabbed his collar and pulled him into a deep, passionate kiss, trailing from his jaw down to his neck. It's heavy. I can't breathe. Alara slowly opened her eyes and saw Kian still holding her tightly. A faint blush spread across her cheeks. He was squeezing her so hard she could barely catch her breath. What was both amusing and frustrating was that even in his deep sleep, his mouth remained slightly parted, as if still teasing her. He suddenly grabbed her hand and brought it to his lips for a kiss. She had never imagined that the oral fixation phase, a symptom she'd only read about, could manifest in the normally stoic Commander Kian. The oral fixation phase, as the name suggests, is when cognitive and expressive functions focus on the mouth. Those affected find comfort in chewing or kissing, developing a strong dependence on a person or object. If separated, they become anxious and show distress by crying. Under normal circumstances, Kian would wake up soon. Either way, I should get up first to avoid any future awkwardness. Alara gently pried Kian's hand from her waist, then carefully lifted his head to slide out from under him. But as she cautiously pulled her hand away, Kian's nose twitched, and a low, whining sound started in his throat, the unmistakable sign of tears about to spill. Panic surged through her. What do I do? Is he going to cry again? I have to keep him quiet right now. Before he could make a sound, Alara leaned down and gently, carefully pressed her lips to his. The sharp, handsome lines of his face softened, his brows relaxing as he calmed. As his breathing steadied, she pulled back. She paused for a second before standing up, gathering her clothes from the floor and stepping outside. It's fine. It was just one time. It's fine, she muttered to herself. Her fingers brushed a mark on her neck and she quickly pulled her collar up, fastening the top button before leaving the room, fully dressed. The moment she stepped outside, she came face to face with Kian's father. Duke Arden, she said politely. The Duke's face was stern. How is my son? Alara felt a bead of sweat trickle down her back. I've treated the commander's injuries, sir. He's stable now. However, an infection caused a fever, which triggered his first volatile phase. And you were with him all night? The Duke pressed. A sharp look crossed the Duke's face. Assistant Vance, I want you to keep quiet about helping him through his volatile phase. Duke Arden, Lieutenant Hayes, and others know I was the only one in the commander's room last night. I don't see how it can be concealed. Don't worry about that, the Duke cut in, his brows furrowing. I'll handle it. I just spoke with Professor Sterling. A succubus hybrid forgets everything that happens during a volatile phase after recovery. I assume you know this, Assistant? Alara bowed her head. I understand. Good, you're dismissed. With that, the Duke turned and walked away. Just pretend nothing happened, she told herself. It's better for everyone. The next morning, Kian woke up in his quarters. Sitting up, he noticed his body had returned to its human form. He frowned, a trace of dissatisfaction crossing his handsome face. Though he couldn't remember last night, he knew his body's instincts. He knew his volatile phase had been triggered, and someone had been with him. Without help, he'd have been tormented by symptoms and wouldn't have recovered this quickly. Kian called Lieutenant Hayes. Hayes, who was in my room last night? I don't know, sir. I was busy handling post-battle reports last night. You might want to ask someone else. Unsatisfied with the response, Kian got out of bed and walked into the living room. He poured himself a glass of water. Just as he was drinking, the front door opened. Alara arrived right on time to prepare his breakfast, only to find him already standing there. His long legs and the sharp lines of his throat moved as he drank. Her eyes traced the strong column of his neck down to his toned frame. The moment his gaze met hers, she quickly looked away. Don't think about yesterday. Nothing happened yesterday. Commander, are you feeling better? She asked, her voice steady as she inquired about his injuries. Just a scratch, he replied coolly. A few minutes later, Alara was helping him get dressed. You'll still need regular bandage changes. After breakfast, I'll redress your wounds. Before she could finish, Kian's hand shot out, grabbing hers as she was tying his tie. The lips that had kissed her last night parted. Assistant Vance, he said. Find the woman who was with me last night. Alara froze. I have to find... myself? She stared at him for a long moment, making sure she hadn't misheard. When she didn't respond, Kian pressed. Is there a problem, Assistant? No, sir, she stammered. Then do it. He tossed the words at her, then tilted his chin toward the half-tied tie, clearly expecting her to finish her task. With a storm of emotions swirling inside, she finished tying his tie, thinking to herself, it was me, you idiot. How am I supposed to investigate that? And does he really think I'm some kind of miracle worker? Why does he keep dumping every little thing on me? Ugh, he should just drop dead. A few days later, things were back to normal. Alara was piloting the shuttle while Kian lounged lazily in the co-pilot's seat, listening to a news broadcast. He absently brought his hand to his mouth. But when his assistant didn't react, he had to suppress a wave of irritation. Alara noticed his mood shift and gave him a discreet glance. Why is he suddenly so grumpy? Better not poke the bear right now. The next moment, she saw him searching for something. When he didn't find it, he turned to her. Don't you have any candy today? Of course, she thought. Some habits never change. He's loved those hard peach candies since we were kids. But after that night, she'd realized something new. His love for candy wasn't just a sweet tooth. Maybe it was a way to manage his adult oral fixation. He needed sugar to keep the symptoms in check. I've got some in my jacket pocket, she replied quickly. Sorry, my hands are full right now. I'll switch to autopilot. Suddenly, Kian leaned close to her. Alara flinched. What's he doing? Before she could react, his hand was in her pocket. A faint blush crept across her cheeks. Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal, but after what happened between them, she couldn't stay as calm as before. When Kian pulled the candy from her pocket, he seemed to notice something too. His hand paused, and he looked up, his gaze lingering on her reddening ears. A rare, fleeting smile crossed his lips, as if he found it amusing to finally see a crack in his assistant's work machine facade. Assistant Vance, what's got you so nervous? Before, Alara wouldn't have thought twice. But now, after being so close to the man in front of her, she couldn't respond to his proximity with her usual cool-headedness. She felt his gaze lingering on her face. Her fingers, resting on the control panel, curled slightly. Nothing, she said, her voice tight. She turned her head away, trying her hardest to push the fiery memories of that night out of her mind. Thankfully, once Kian had retrieved the candy, he pulled his hand back and settled into his seat. Alara stole a glance at him. It seemed like he'd just asked casually. He didn't really care. He unwrapped the candy and popped it into his mouth before leaning back, closing his eyes and slipping back into his usual cold, distant demeanor. Alara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. After the day's work was done, Alara checked her schedule. With the military campaign over, her long-planned vacation was finally here. She briefed Lieutenant Hayes on the commander's daily routines and schedule, ensuring everything would run smoothly in her absence. With everything squared away, she hopped into her personal shuttle and headed home to Ethel for some much-needed rest. But there was one key detail she'd overlooked. She forgot to tell Kian she was leaving. As soon as she stepped through the door, she called out, "Dad, Mom, I'm home!" Her mom rushed out to greet her. "Alara, sweetheart, I heard you were coming back, so I spruced up your room. Go check it out and see if you like it." "I love it," Alara said with a smile. Her dad chimed in, "Sweetie, go wash your hands for dinner. I didn't let the robots touch a thing. I made all your favorite dishes myself." As they talked, Grandpa Vance sat down at the table, shooting his son-in-law a disapproving look. "You're always wasting time on trivial nonsense. No sense of propriety." "Dad, can you stop with the snide remarks? If you can't stand being around us, you're welcome to move out," her mom shot back. Her dad, clearly used to this, just grinned. "I'm just excited because our little girl's home." Grandpa Vance opened his mouth to say more, but seeing both his daughter and granddaughter staring at him, he grumbled, "Fine, let's eat." Dinner started off cheerfully, but halfway through, her grandfather suddenly brought up something. "You remember that young Marcus from the Pooh family, Caden, don't you?" Alara had skimmed his profile in the First Star's Noble database and had a vague recollection. "I remember, but why, Grandpa?" Her grandfather paused briefly before saying, "Since you're on leave, you should make time to have dinner with him tomorrow. I'll handle the arrangements." The sudden announcement caught Alara off guard. "Are you setting me up on a blind date?" Noticing her discomfort, her grandfather rephrased, "Just meet with him. If you hit it off, all the better." Her mom frowned, then after a moment's hesitation said, "Ellie, don't force yourself. If you and this Marquis Caden don't click, just let it be." "I know," Alara said, her voice tense. "With all the skirmishes at the galaxy's edge, I'm always on call. I really don't have the energy to date anyone right now. Besides, not long ago, my boss and we accidentally got involved." When Kian came downstairs after his nap, he still looked a bit groggy, but his military discipline kept his tall, commanding posture intact. Each step down the stairs showcased his powerful build. He heard noises from the kitchen and assumed Alara was preparing lunch, but when he walked in, he saw a service robot setting the meal on the table. "Where's Assistant Vance?" he asked, his voice icy as he stared at the food. The robot's voice function activated, playing a pre-recorded message from Alara. "Hello, Commander. Assistant Alara Vance is currently on leave for 3 days." Hearing this, Kian's lips pressed into a thin, hard line. His expression grew even colder. "So, I'm without an assistant for the next 3 days?" The next day, Alara followed the location data her grandfather's staff sent to an upscale restaurant. There, she met Marquis Caden, a polite and refined young man. Over dinner, she learned he was also there due to family pressure, which put her at ease. They were chatting pleasantly when the restaurant manager hurried to their table. "Ms. Vance," he said urgently, "could you check your communicator?" Confused, Alara activated the wrist communicator. The screen lit up with a staggering number, 39 missed calls, all from Commander Kian. Panic surged through her. She assumed something serious must have happened at headquarters. Just as she was about to call back, the communicator buzzed again. She shot Caden an apologetic look and answered. Bracing for a reprimand, she was instead met with a cold question. "Where did you put the watch I brought back from the 4th star trip?" Alara blinked. All those calls, just for a watch. She kept her voice as calm as possible. "It's in your bedroom, second drawer of the nightstand." The line disconnected. She didn't bother dwelling on it. Putting away her communicator, she looked up and saw Caden watching her. "Sorry about that," she said. "No problem," he replied. "We were talking about—" Her communicator buzzed again. She answered immediately, her patience starting to wear thin. "Commander, is there something else? Are you losing patience with me?" Kian's voice was ice cold. "No, sir," she said carefully. "I was just saying there are plenty of other watches in your cabinet if you—" He cut her off bluntly. "Assistant, I'm looking for the watch from the 4th star." Alara rubbed her temple. "All right, I'll send detailed instructions to Lieutenant Hayes about where to find it. Is that okay?" "Who gave you permission to let someone else into my home?" His voice suddenly turned sharp, laced with possessiveness. Alara's simmering frustration was momentarily replaced by a strange feeling in her chest, like the flick of a succubus's tail. Then she reassured herself. "Alara, it's just the territorial instincts of a succubus hybrid. He's only protecting his space. Don't overthink it." After a brief pause, she explained, "The thing is, Commander, I'm in Ethel right now. I can't come back immediately." Kian's response was calm but sent a chill through her. "I'm in Ethel. I'll come get you." The line disconnected, leaving Alara stunned. At that moment, a deafening roar echoed through the air, the familiar sound of one of his warships. The small warship descended steadily toward the restaurant. The dramatic arrival looked like a major planetary event. Moments later, a man in a military uniform stepped out of the hatch and strode toward her. She took a deep breath, silently cursing him. Is he out of his mind? The next thing she knew, Kian was standing in front of her. His gaze landed on the man sitting across from her, and an inexplicable anger flared in his eyes. He frowned. His stare locked onto Caden. Let's go, Kian said to Alara. Commander, I'm in the middle of... she whispered. Caden suddenly spoke up. Sir, if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Vance is on leave, isn't she? Kian's expression darkened. He shot Caden a piercing glare. It seems you're unfamiliar with the nature of our work. This is an emergency. Her leave is cancelled. Caden was too stunned by his commanding presence to respond. Suddenly, Kian grabbed Alara's hand. She froze. Is he seriously holding my hand? Let's go, Kian repeated, his voice thick with irritation, and he led her out of the restaurant, his grip firm on her hand. The warship was astonishingly fast, reaching his estate in just minutes. Standing at the door to his bedroom, Alara said patiently, I'll go get the watch for you, sir. Kian, still in a foul mood, only grunted in response. Alara went straight to where she remembered leaving the watch. She opened the nightstand drawer, pushed aside a few documents, and there it was, safely tucked in its box. It's right here, she said coolly, in the exact drawer I told you about. Kian took the watch with an air of indifference. I looked, didn't see it. Guess you hid it too well. Alara's eye twitched. Jerk. He didn't even bother looking properly. And now it's my fault? But he was her boss, so she swallowed her anger. I'll be more careful in the future. Any other arrangements, Commander? Kian opened his schedule. The President wants to establish a way station on Cygnus Prime. I've been assigned to the mission. He paused, his gaze lazily sweeping over her for a few seconds before deciding for her. Assistant, you're coming with me. That was the last straw. I'm still on leave, she protested. Kian seemed to actually consider this for a moment. Just as he was about to speak, his communicator buzzed. He glanced at the caller ID and answered with a scowl. The spaceport just detected one of your fleet's warships entering Ethel airspace. Is that correct? Correct, Kian replied nonchalantly. I need a valid reason, Duke Arden shouted through the communicator. You had the entire military command lie to me about my volatile phase. Personally, I'm very curious about the woman who was with me that night, the one you went to such lengths to hide from me. Don't change the subject, the Duke snapped. That's an insignificant detail, and you don't need to be distracted by it. Oh, Kian said dryly. The Duke could tell he wasn't listening. I can't talk to you, you stubborn fool. Is Assistant Vance there? Put her on. Hearing this, Kian lazily glanced at Alara. He glared at her, annoyed but silent. He's the one causing trouble? And he has the nerve to glare at me? She felt like she was about to explode, but then Kian tilted his head slightly, his eyes carrying a questioning look. Alara's breath caught. Damn it. Now, every time he tilts his head like that, she couldn't help but think of that night, how he looked with those little horns nuzzling her neck like an adorable puppy. But then reality snapped her back. That was just an illusion. The infuriating man in front of her was the real Kian. While she was lost in thought, Kian ended the call, clearly fed up with his father's lecture. Just as Alara sighed in relief, her communicator buzzed. She glanced at the screen and said coolly to him, It's the Duke. Give it here. I'll hang up for you, Kian offered, holding out his hand like he was doing her a favor. She shot him another look and reluctantly answered the call. Assistant Vance, I chose you to stay by Kian's side because of your exceptional competence. I expect you to take your duties seriously. How could you let this happen? I'll do my best, Alara said through gritted teeth. Not your best. You must ensure he behaves properly. What are you thinking? She wanted to scream. How am I supposed to know what that jerk will do? This better not happen again, the Duke said, then hung up before she could respond. Alara frowned, then looked up to see Kian watching her with an amused expression, a faint smile on his lips. Commander, do you find this funny? He politely wiped the smile off his face. I'm sorry for dragging you into this, Assistant. I'm not feeling a lot of sincerity there, Commander. He stroked his chin thoughtfully, his expression showing genuine curiosity. Oh? What would make it more sincere? A raise for starters, she said without hesitation. Kian raised an eyebrow. Thinking he was about to refuse, Alara took a step forward, looking down at him. Getting called back to work during my vacation? Asking for a raise isn't too much, is it? Assistant, he replied nonchalantly. Before you went on leave, you're sure you completed all your assigned tasks? Of course I'm sure, she shot back, indignant that he'd question her work ethic. Do you think I'd leave without finishing everything? Oh? Then tell me, Assistant, have you found the woman who was with me that night? Alara looked away, suddenly speechless. Weren't we talking about a raise? Why is he circling back to this? Kian observed her reaction, a soft chuckle escaping his lips. It seems my assistant hasn't quite finished her duties, he drawled. So what? I'll give you a chance to make up for it. Come with me to Cygnus Prime, and when we return, we can seriously discuss that raise. Alara stood firm, not answering right away. Don't worry, he added. I'll make it worth your effort. Ellie, sweetheart, why are you already heading back to the military? I thought you had 3 days off. Before boarding the shuttle, Alara called her mom to let her know she had to return to work. She couldn't exactly say, well, the thing is, he's paying me an obscene amount of money. So she just said, Mom, an emergency came up. I'll find time to visit soon. All right, but next time you have to stay longer. I'll try. Alara spent a few more minutes reassuring her mom before finally saying goodbye. Mom, you and Dad take care. I'll see you both next time. Love you. She hung up. When she turned around, she jumped. Kian was standing right behind her. He looked at her for a moment, his voice even. You're quite the charmer, assistant. Alara was completely thrown off, but before she could say anything, he flashed a sly smirk and stepped onto the shuttle. She had no choice but to follow him. Once inside, Alara suddenly asked, How did you know which restaurant I was at today? I had the AI track you, he replied, without a hint of concern. The answer was exactly what she expected, but it still made her face stiffen. Commander, from now on, you're not allowed to abuse your authority to monitor my personal activities. Kian seemed to pick up on the unusual seriousness in her voice. After a moment of silence, he offered a compromise. If you promise to answer my calls from now on, I'll agree. Yes, sir, she replied without hesitation. Upon arriving at Cygnus Prime, Alara conducted a sweep of the surrounding area. Succubus hybrids need to regularly consume ether fruit to replenish their internal energy crystals, and fortunately, the soil here was suitable for cultivation. The environment has been confirmed safe. The quarters are habitable. It's currently 21 wow. The bathroom's heating system is activated. The bath will be ready in 10 seconds, allowing the commander to maintain his bathing schedule. After her report, she quickly checked his bedroom, then went to personally prepare his bathwater. When the water reached the right temperature, she was about to head downstairs to inform Kian, but he walked in on his own. Alara was leaning over the tub, the fitted lines of her uniform accentuating her slender figure. Kian's gaze lingered on her for a moment. He cleared his throat. Assistant, stand up. She stood looking at him with curiosity, but he just ushered her out of the bathroom. All right, you can go now. Good night. He promptly slammed the door in her face. Alara stared at the closed door, utterly confused. What's his deal now? Talk about mood swings. She was exhausted after the long day. After a quick shower, she collapsed onto her bed and fell into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, she vaguely heard a soft knock at her door. At first, she thought it was a dream, but when she opened her eyes, she realized someone was actually there. Grumbling, she dragged herself out of bed, her face full of sleepy irritation. She flung the door open and saw a disheveled man standing there, clutching a pillow so tightly his knuckles were white. His lips parted, and he said ever so casually, Assistant Vance, there's an insect in my room. Alara stared at him for a second. He was so calm she almost thought he was scolding her for negligence. But then she remembered something from their time at the research facility. Kian was deathly afraid of insects. With that realization, she looked closer and saw that beneath his composed expression, his face was tense. He was genuinely scared. Alara's irritation melted away instantly. She patiently followed him to his room. Where's the insect? Kian refused to step inside. He stood at the threshold, coolly directing her, 10 centimeters to the right of the headboard. A minute later, Alara emerged, the insect dealt with. All right, it's dead. I'm going back to sleep. Suddenly, Kian grabbed her hand. She looked up at him. But he didn't say anything, just held her hand tightly. After a moment, she rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off some of her grogginess. Are you still scared, Commander? No. He denied immediately. Right. I'm the one who's scared, my bad, she said, too tired to argue. She led him back to his bedroom and pointed at the bed. Lie down. I'll keep watch. All right, he said, as if worried she'd change her mind. He quickly set his pillow on the bed and lay down. Under his watchful gaze, Alara had no choice but to pull up a chair and sit beside him. Seeing her keep her promise, Kian finally relaxed and slowly closed his eyes. Alara planned to wait until he was asleep and then sneak back to her room, but she must have been more exhausted than she thought because she ended up dozing off. A while later, her head slumped forward. Kian instantly caught it with his hand, his eyes fixed on her sleeping face. After a while, his arm started to go numb. He gently lifted her onto the bed, then sat on the floor beside her, watching over her while absent-mindedly stroking her hand. The next morning, when Alara woke up, the man was gone. All that remained was a message on her communicator. I'm heading to the development zone. No need to follow. Go to the local medical relief team and organize their data. Pick me up this afternoon when I'm done. Alara raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised. Normally, Kian insisted she accompany him on every mission. Why was this time different? And how did I end up in his bed? Did I sleepwalk and kick him out? Is he mad? She wondered. Whatever, I'm not going to question a rare chance to relax. The quiet morning passed quickly. Alara thought the day would be uneventful, but then she ran into someone unexpected. It was Leo, her senior from medical school. The director mentioned someone from the first star was visiting. I can't believe it's you, Alara. Here, this file might be useful for you. Thanks, Leo. This is the last piece I needed, she said, taking the stack of documents. Now the medical inventory list is finally complete. Since they'd run into each other, Leo invited her downstairs for coffee. Alara had some new ideas about medical technology she wanted to discuss with him, and since she had time, she happily agreed. When they finished talking, she checked the time. It was time for Kian to wrap up work. Leo, I've got to go pick up my boss, she said, heading to her vehicle. I'll let you know when the supply request from the first star gets approved. Sounds good, he nodded. The roads here are rough, so be careful. The development zone was in a rugged, mountainous area. Thanks to her expert driving skills, Alara arrived without a hitch. The team had just finished the day's work, so she stayed in the vehicle and waited for her boss, not wanting to interrupt. From a distance, she spotted the most commanding figure at the site. Kian had changed into a black work uniform and was busy measuring something with a survey tool, barking orders at the team. The plain uniform, which looked ordinary on others, seemed to radiate a quiet, powerful energy on his striking frame. Right then, Kian noticed her. He handed the tool to a subordinate and walked over. When did you get here? He asked, his eyes scanning her. Just now, Alara replied coolly. Are you done for the day, Commander? He grunted in confirmation, his gaze lingering on her with a certain weight. Got any candy? Right here, she said, quickly pulling a lollipop from her pocket. She was about to hand it to him when she noticed his hands were covered in dirt. Hesitating, she asked softly, Should I unwrap it for you? He just looked at her for a moment, then stuffed his dirty hands into his pockets and said quietly, Yeah. Why do you smell like coffee? And why do you smell like you've been around another man? Alara carefully unwrapped the lollipop and held it out. As Kian leaned down to take it with his mouth, his lips brushed against her fingertips. She yanked her hand back instantly, only to see him staring at her, the lollipop stick clenched between his teeth. His gaze locked onto the spot where his lips had just brushed her skin. Being stared at like that sent an odd sensation through her chest, reminding her of how her big puppy had looked at her that night. She opened her mouth, about to say something to break the tension, but Kian suddenly stepped closer, pinning her between his body and the open car door. Without warning, he leaned down, his sharp nose sniffing the air by her cheek. He pulled the lollipop from his mouth. Assistant, where were you today? Alara's body stiffened. As he spoke, she could smell the sweet, enticing peach scent on his breath. Snapping out of her daze, she pushed him back and cleared her throat. I was at the hospital. He looked at her, his face expressionless. Then why do you smell like coffee? And why do you smell like you've been around another man? A wave of panic hit her. My fault. I forgot how abnormally sharp a succubus hybrid sense of smell is. I ran into a senior from med school at the hospital, she explained. We grabbed coffee and talked for a bit after I finished my work. He accidentally spilled some on me and helped wipe it off, that's all. I didn't think I needed to report that to you. Was all he said. He opened the back door himself and slid into the back seat. Alara frowned. Is he mad? Why? Oh, right. He's out there working hard while I, his assistant, was off having coffee with someone else. Maybe that didn't sit right. Plus, succubi are possessive. My showing up with another man's scent probably offended his instincts. I'll have to be more careful about that during work hours. With that in mind, she buckled her seatbelt and glanced in the rearview mirror. The man in the back seat was pouting, sucking on the lollipop, radiating a gloomy aura. It should have been an intimidating sight. But as Alara started the car, a small smile tugged at her lips. The thought of the great commander sitting in the back, sulking over a lollipop, was actually kind of adorable. Back at the estate, Alara spent nearly 2 hours wrapping up her work. It was late when she left the office. She glanced upstairs, assuming Kian was asleep, and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. She looked up at the starry sky, taking a slow drag, letting the smoke soothe her frayed nerves. What she didn't know was that someone was watching her every move. After a few minutes, he saw she was still smoking. The way her long, slender fingers held the cigarette as she lazily exhaled puffs of smoke made him frown. He abruptly drew the curtain shut and headed downstairs. And a moment later, Alara heard footsteps behind her. She turned around, startled to see Kian, who she thought was asleep, walking toward her. She instinctively hid the cigarette behind her back. His eyes flicked to her hands. I don't remember you being a smoker, assistant. Since she'd been caught red-handed, she dropped the pretense. I just never smoked in front of you, she said bluntly. He looked down at her, a hint of confusion in his eyes. You don't like the smell of smoke, do you, Commander? She sighed. She was sure everyone on his team knew full well that Commander Kian hated the smell of cigarette smoke. After a long pause, he finally looked away. I don't hate it that much, he muttered. Ilara was so stunned she didn't know how to respond. He cleared his throat. Tomorrow you'll come with me to the development zone. And with that, he quickly retreated. Ilara stood there, frozen, thinking to herself, why did he say that? The next day, Kian and Ilara headed to the development zone together. After hands-on work the previous day, today Kian's only task was monitoring data from the top of the control tower. Meanwhile, Ilara's role was reduced to fetching tea and water for him. She tried several times to ask permission to help downstairs, or at least let someone else handle the drinks. But Kian refused. Each time she brought it up, he just asked, what if I get thirsty later? She glared at him, thinking, then you can just die of thirst. Suddenly, one of the project leads approached. Commander, the way station construction is progressing smoothly. At this rate, Cygnus Prime will soon have its first interplanetary connection. Excellent. Kian nodded. Commander, since we're finishing early today, would you like to join us for a celebratory dinner tonight? Hearing the enthusiastic invitation, Ilara was about to decline on his behalf, knowing her boss hated crowds, but Kian surprised her. Sure. What's with him today, she wondered. That evening, they arrived at the restaurant. The dinner went as expected, with everyone constantly trying to toast the commander. At first, Ilara didn't intervene, but as more people approached and Kian showed no signs of refusing, she had to step in and start taking the drinks for him. The commander can't have any more. Thanks for understanding. It was late when the dinner finally ended. As they reached the parking lot, Ilara saw Kian climb into the passenger seat on his own and sighed in relief, thinking he wasn't drunk after all. Half an hour later, they pulled up in front of the estate. Ilara told Kian to get out of the car, but he just sat there, motionless. When he heard his name, he seemed to snap out of his daze, turning to look at her with deep, intense eyes. Thinking he just didn't want to move, she leaned over to open the car door for him. But as her hand reached across, she froze. Kian was sitting upright, his expression calm. But the moment she leaned close, a tail appeared behind him, its tip lightly brushing the back of her hand. Is he in succubus mode again? She instinctively tried to pull her hand back, but the sudden movement threw her off balance. Kian's hand shot out to steady her, and he used the momentum to pull her into his lap. Her first instinct was to look down. The tail was now possessively resting on her hip. A flush of heat spread across her face. Let go, she hissed, looking up at him. His face was flushed, his breath heavy with the smell of alcohol, but his voice was surprisingly steady. Just for a minute. She tried to push him off. Let me go first. She caught herself. I mean, let go of your tail. He didn't move the tail. She gave him a stern look. Commander, if you don't stop, I'll report you to the Federation for workplace harassment. That seemed to sober him up a bit. He looked at her silently for a moment. Then the tail loosened its grip. Ilara let out a relieved breath. Good, he's still capable of listening to reason. She quickly climbed out of his lap and stepped out of the car. Sobering meds. I need sobering meds. He's definitely drunk to be acting like this. As she started walking toward the house, Kian called after her. Assistant, where are you going? She didn't look back, not wanting to see him waving that tail around. Getting you some sobering meds? Right then, he caught up to her and grabbed her arm, spinning her around to face him. He looked down at her and explained, I'm not drunk. According to my internal diagnostics, my brain is just producing more dopamine than usual, because you were too close to me in the car. He hiccuped. Ilara quickly pulled her hand free. That was a loud hiccup. And he says he's not drunk? She turned away, frowning. I'm still getting you those sobering meds. She headed toward the house, with Kian quietly trailing behind. Ilara opened the medical kit she'd brought from the first star. As soon as she found what she was looking for, Kian grabbed her hand and placed it on his chest. He stared at her intently. According to my internal diagnostics, he repeated seriously, it's because you were too close to me in the car. Your proximity triggered an above-average dopamine release in my brain. Ilara was floored by his absurdly scientific-sounding nonsense. What the hell is he talking about? She handed him the vial of meds. Am I the doctor here, or are you? He gazed at her deeply for a few seconds before taking the vial and downing it in one gulp. Then he looked up. Assistant. Afraid he was about to say more nonsense, she cut him off. Commander, you can go to your room now. We have work tomorrow. What about me? He countered. You're the one who made my tail come out. You can't just leave me like this. Ilara pressed a hand to her forehead, trying not to laugh. You'll calm down on your own, Commander. Are you saying I'm not calm? He challenged. She shot him a look, wanting to say, Are you kidding me? but instead she said, I mean, you'll be fine once the alcohol wears off. He suddenly wrapped his arm around her waist, his eyes locked on hers. You still don't believe I'm not drunk, do you, assistant? She'd had enough. She pushed him away, walked to the next room, opened the door for him, and made a polite after you gesture. He just looked at her, raising an eyebrow. Finally, without another word, he strode into the room. The moment the door was closing, she felt something soft and fuzzy brush against her palm. She slammed the door shut almost immediately. What was that? Why is my hand tingling like this? She stood outside his room for a moment, and when she heard no more sounds, she headed back to her own room. She showered, then chugged a bottle of ice-cold water to calm her racing thoughts. The next second, her communicator rang. Seeing it was Duke Arden, she lowered her voice and answered. Assistant Vance, how are things on Cygnus Prime? Under the commander's leadership, the way station construction is progressing smoothly. No need to worry, Duke. She replied quietly. Good. The main reason the president sent him there is to curb some of his temperament. Keon can be too erratic at times. When you return, I want you to convince him to visit the family estate. Ilara highly doubted Keon would listen to a word from her. He was the boss. She was just the assistant. But since the Duke had requested it, she had no choice but to agree. Understood, Duke. After hanging up, she collapsed onto the bed, finally ready to sleep. Another chaotic day. She'd just drifted off when she heard a gentle knock at the door again. She forced her eyes open and sat up. I swear he's doing this on purpose. Why wait until I'm asleep to bother me? She was ready to give her inconsiderate boss a piece of her mind, but the words died in her throat the moment she opened the door. He stood there, a pair of soft demon horns drooping amid his tousled hair, clutching his pillow tightly. But unlike the previous night, this time his eyes were red and puffy, and he was lightly scratching at the doorframe like a lost kitten. When he saw her, his big, watery eyes locked onto hers, and he whimpered, Ellie, I missed you. Ilara stared at him, stunned. It hadn't been that long since his last sensitive episode. Why was this one coming so soon? Before she could process it, the man at the threshold let out a small sob, and the triangular tip of his tail trembled. Then he burst into tears. Ellie, he cried, you didn't answer me right away. Ilara sighed, rubbing her forehead. Great, no sleep tonight. Ilara couldn't stay firm. She tried to soothe him. Come on, I'll take you back to your room, okay? At the suggestion of being taken to his own room, the little horns on his head drooped. He sobbed, his voice choked with distress but resolute. I don't want to sleep alone. Faced with those big, teary eyes, so pitiful they couldn't be ignored, Ilara knew she had to handle this carefully. She understood that a succubus in this state needed soothing, or they could lose all reason and be overtaken by primal instincts. After just a few seconds of deliberation, she sighed and stepped aside, letting him into her room. She closed the door and turned to face him. The first thing he did was place his pillow on her bed, arranging it neatly right next to hers. Then he lay down on her side of the bed, pulled the blanket up, and looked at her with wide, expectant eyes, clearly waiting for her to join him. Ilara frowned but stepped forward. Her plan was to get him to sleep, then report this unexpected incident to the Federation. The moment she sat on the edge of the bed, he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close so they were face to face. The sudden possessive move startled her. She put her hands on his shoulders, her expression stern. Aren't we supposed to sleep? What are you doing? He hugged her, a bit hesitantly. Ellie, I missed you. I want to sleep while holding you. Keon, she said, taking a deep breath, if you keep this up, I won't let you hold me at all. He let out a pitiful whimper at the threat, and his tail drooped reluctantly. Seeing him behave, Ilara agreed to lie down with him but didn't hold back her warning. Just sleep, no funny business. He looked at her, his mouth opening and closing, but he didn't dare argue. The expression on his face was full of disappointment. Despite that, he buried his face in the crook of her neck, his possessiveness winning out as he mumbled, Ellie, why aren't you hugging me back? Hearing him repeat her nickname in that soft, vulnerable voice started to wear her down. She firmly pushed his head away. Go to sleep. Just get him to sleep, she thought. Tomorrow he'll be back to normal, like last time. But the next morning, Ilara overslept. If Keon really wakes up and sees me in his bed, how am I going to explain this? As her mind raced, the man above her suddenly cupped her face, his nose brushing against hers. Ellie, he whispered, can I kiss you? Her eyes widened. She stared at the horns still peeking through his hair, and a sense of dread hit her. Oh no, this isn't like last time. Something's really wrong with him. No, you can't, she said instinctively. But he'd already started nuzzling her, his face rubbing against her cheek and neck. It was a deliberate, methodical action, like a wild animal marking its territory, trying to cover her with his scent. Alara knew enough about succubus biology to understand what was happening. He was marking her. What embarrassed and shocked her was that, in his transformed state, Kian instinctively saw her as his territory. Suddenly, she shoved him off. "Kian!" she shouted. He looked down at her, confused. His eyes were red and wet, his usually pale face now abnormally flushed. He looked like he'd been on the verge of bliss, only to be abruptly stopped. Alara forced herself to stay calm. "Get off me, right now," she said sternly. He bit his lower lip, a clear sign of his oral fixation, but her firm tone made him hold back. He complied. "Now go to your room, wash your face, and change," she ordered. She'd found his weakness, a commanding tone. He sat up, tilting his head. "What about you, Ellie?" She resisted the urge to reach out and fix a stray lock of his messy hair. "I'm going to make breakfast," she said seriously, "and call Professor Sterling at the First Star Research Facility." He seemed to consider this, then reluctantly nodded. While waiting in the kitchen, Alara called Professor Sterling. When she described what had happened, he sounded surprised. To clarify, he had to ask bluntly, "Did Commander Kian become intimate with you this time?" "No," Alara said, maintaining her composure. "Alara, I need you to describe last night's events in detail," he pressed. She was about to speak when a pair of arms wrapped around her from behind. A weight pressed against her back, and a grumpy voice mumbled, "Ellie, who are you talking to?" Professor Sterling paused. He seemed to realize she couldn't talk freely. "Alara, we'll continue this conversation when you're free," he said before hanging up. Alara turned her head and found Kian's face rubbing against hers. After a few nuzzles, her irritation melted away. "I'm making breakfast," she sighed. "I heard you talking to someone," the big, clingy puppy behind her whined. "I was just consulting Professor Sterling about a work issue." As she spoke, he nibbled lightly on her shoulder, interrupting her. She pointed to the door. His big eyes welled up as he looked at her, full of confusion. "But how can I not be near you, Ellie?" "How can you not?" she shot back coolly. His eyes instantly filled with tears. He started sobbing. "I'll die of misery." "No, you won't," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, I will," he cried, practically on the verge of a full meltdown. Seeing he was about to cry again, she softened her tone. "If you keep talking nonsense, you're not getting breakfast." He looked at her with pitiful, teary eyes and sniffled. She couldn't stay mad at him. "Fine, we'll go together," she conceded. "Wait," he cheered, instantly perking up. He followed her to the dining room like an eager puppy and sat down. Normally, Alara used breakfast time to brief him on the day's schedule. But today, when she turned to speak, she saw him quietly sipping a glass of milk, his tail gently wagging in satisfaction after every few sips. He finished his glass of milk and let out a soft burp, the faint scent of milk lingering. Seeing her boss like this only gave Alara a bigger headache. How are we supposed to keep working on the development project with him acting like this? Kian noticed her gloomy expression. He blinked, then leaned in close, his breath still sweet with the scent of milk. "Ellie, are you upset?" His eyes darted back and forth for a few seconds, then without a word, he jumped up and bolted out of the room. "All right, now's my chance to call Professor Sterling back." To make sure Kian didn't overhear this time, she put on her earpiece. "Professor, to continue our conversation, though his behavior is similar to the last sensitive episode, he's very compliant this time. If I tell him to stop, he stops. If there was no intercourse, then this isn't a true volatile phase," Professor Sterling replied quickly. Alara agreed. If it was a real heat cycle, there's no way Kian could restrain his instincts. Right then, the front door swung open. She looked up, and as expected, it was Kian. "Please hold on, Professor," she said. His hair was a mess, flecked with a few wet leaves, and his clothes had smudges of dirt. He was carrying a basket overflowing with ether fruit. He strode over to her, picked out the ripest, sweetest red berry, and held it out, his deep eyes gazing at her with pure adoration. "For my favorite Ellie." The sweet, intoxicating aroma of the berry seemed to fill the air, making her feel lightheaded for a second. "I'm full from breakfast," she said, declining. "I'm not hungry." A flicker of disappointment crossed his face, but afraid of upsetting her again, he just said, "Okay." He sat down across from her, clutching the basket of fruit, and started nibbling on a berry, his eyes filled with joy as he watched her work. Alara could feel his innocent, intense gaze, but she tried her best to focus on the hollow screen in front of her. Right then, Professor Sterling's voice came through her earpiece. "Alara, check the ether fruit on Cygnus Prime. It could be an adverse reaction to the local flora." Alara looked up, her eyes meeting Kian's. For a moment, she got lost in his gaze, but she kept her composure. "Kian, on second thought, I think I'd like to try one of those." He immediately handed her the berry he'd picked out, his eyes sparkling with genuine affection. "Ellie, I'm sharing the sweetest one with you." His stare felt like it could burn through her. Thanks, she said quickly, taking a bite. The berry was unbelievably sweet. Worried the issue might be with the fruit, she came up with an excuse. Kian, I want more. Can I have all the berries in your basket? His eyes widened, the half-eaten berry still in his mouth. He hesitated. Ellie, all of them? Yes, she said calmly. Don't you want to share with me? He quickly shook his head and pushed the entire basket toward her. Her gaze fell on the half-eaten berry in his hand. He followed her look and glanced down at it, his voice soft and pitiful. But this is my last half. She knew she was being a bit shameless, but she cleared her throat. You won't even give me your last half? He bit his lip. After just a moment's hesitation, he obediently handed over the last piece of fruit. With what she needed in hand, Alara's expression returned to normal. Ignoring whether Kian was happy about it, she took the basket of berries to the kitchen. She activated the diagnostic device and began analyzing the berry she'd eaten. Less than 30 seconds later, the results appeared on the screen. The truth was clear. The ether fruit grown on Cygnus Prime had significantly lower energy content than the standard. She immediately sent the data to Professor Sterling, along with her conclusion. The commander's symptoms are due to an energy imbalance from consuming local ether fruit. This is an adverse reaction, not a volatile phase. That may well be, the professor replied. But Alara, you need to be careful. The commander is in a volatile state and could become unstable at any moment. You need to keep him calm. Just as he said that, the kitchen door opened. Kian stood there, his eyes red, looking like he'd just suffered a great injustice. What's wrong? She asked, assuming he was upset because she took his fruit. He stayed quiet for a long while, but when she spoke up, he couldn't hold back any longer. He groaned, Ellie, it's been 5 minutes since we last hugged. Ellie, do you really understand what you did wrong? I shouldn't have ignored you to focus on work. Seeing she still wasn't moving, tears welled up in his eyes. Ellie ignored me for work. I feel so abandoned. His voice hitched with a sob, and his agitation grew. He desperately needed to bite something, so he grabbed his own tail and began gnawing on it, whimpering. The sight was so heartbreakingly pathetic that Alara couldn't just stand by and watch. This was a prelude to a full-blown succubus meltdown, and she had to act fast. Recalling Professor Sterling's warning, she feared he would completely spiral. She shot to her feet, gently pulled the tip of his tail from his mouth, and wrapped her arms around him. She held the man, who was a full head taller than her, and patted his back gently. Okay, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Kian slumped against her, resting his head in the crook of her neck and hugging her tightly. Tears streamed down his face as he sobbed. Do you really know what you did wrong? Trapped in his embrace, squeezed so tightly she could barely breathe, Alara swallowed her pride and repeated, I shouldn't have ignored you to focus on my work. He buried his face against her neck, his cries muffled against her skin. It was as if the 5 minutes of anxious waiting had finally been validated. Fearing his emotional instability, Alara didn't dare push him away. She let him cry it out, stroking his head and murmuring, Don't cry, while sighing to herself. Until Kian is back to normal, I can't leave him alone for a second. Under her gentle comfort, Kian's emotions soon stabilized. Alara looked up at his face, so close to hers, and felt an uncontrollable blush creep up her cheeks. He nuzzled her face with his nose, his voice still thick with emotion. What's wrong? Just as she was about to speak, an ill-timed call from Duke Arden came through. Alara started to answer, but Kian, feeling ignored, angrily ended the call. He cupped her face in his hands, his expression serious, demanding her complete attention. Forced to meet his gaze, Alara could already imagine the Duke's fury. To save her job, she had to remind him, Kian, that was your father. Completely oblivious to the danger, he just held her stubbornly. I don't care. I only want you, Ellie. Her face flushed. She had to admit she was a sucker for that. Damn it. A second later, the comm rang again. Seeing Kian's puffed-up cheeks as he moved to end the call again, Alara didn't hesitate. She grabbed his hand, tilted her head up, and gave him a quick, soft peck on the lip. Kian, be good now. He froze, stunned. It took a moment for him to process that his favorite person had just kissed him. The 2 small horns nestled in his hair immediately perked up, and he leaned in for more. Alara quickly pressed a finger to his lips. The Duke might really have something important to say. Just give me a few minutes. He anxiously rubbed his cheek against her fingertip. Will you kiss me again later? His bluntness made her face burn, but she forced a calm expression and promised, I will. Satisfied, he finally loosened his grip on her waist, his hands moving to her arms instead. Okay, but you have to be quick, Ellie. Alara came to a complicated conclusion. In this state, Kian was unbelievably clingy. She couldn't leave, so she had no choice but to answer the call right there in front of him. The Duke's icy voice immediately came through. Assistant Vance, do you now have the audacity to hang up on me? Just as Alara opened her mouth to explain, She felt a sharp pain in her finger and let out a small hiss. Kian instantly panicked, grabbing her hand and blowing on it gently. "I'm sorry, Ellie, I bit you too hard. Let me make it better." On the other end of the line, the Duke, who was used to his cold, defiant eldest son, seemed to be hearing this side of him for the first time. He was silent for a long moment before finally asking, "Is Kian with you right now?" Alara lowered her eyes, her feelings a tangled mess. "Yes, sir." "Has he been like this since last night?" She nodded. "Professor Sterling said he's not adapting well to the environment here on Cygnus. To avoid any accidents, we should return to the first star for treatment as soon as possible." Suddenly, Kian intertwined his fingers with hers, his long, distinct knuckles pressing against her own, a slow, insistent warmth spreading from his touch. She stared at their joined hands, her mind wandering as she answered the Duke. "But the work here on Cygnus isn't finished yet." Kian looked up, his expression pitiful and his eyes fixated on her face. "Ellie," he whined, "didn't you say it would only be a few minutes?" Without thinking, Alara slapped a hand over his mouth. "Stop talking. The Duke is going to have my head." Already agitated, being silenced was the last straw. He started to struggle, trying to pull her hand away. All the Duke could hear from his end was a series of indescribable scuffling sounds. "I will contact you later, assistant," he said, his tone unchanging, and ended the call. "Kian, don't!" Alara looked at Kian's face, so close to her own, and felt her cheeks burn. He hugged her, rubbing his nose affectionately against her cheek, his voice still a little choked up. "What's wrong? Didn't you promise you'd kiss me again?" She looked at him, at his wide, glistening eyes and the pure, innocent way he was looking at her. It was impossible to reconcile this with the cold, arrogant Kian she knew. This was driving her crazy. But Kian wasn't thinking about any of that. He couldn't stop himself from leaning down and kissing her again. Ellie. So soft and sweet. After a while, a soft mist clouded her eyes. Just looking at him in this state was enough to make her weak. Fearing he would take things further, she quickly placed a hand on his head. "Kian, wait." He looked up at her, confused. "Aren't we going to keep kissing, Ellie?" His sweet scent was all over her lips. If this continued, things would get completely out of hand. She deliberately hardened her expression. "Kian, I'm warning you, I have to work. You will get off of me right now or you can forget about dinner." He huffed. "Fine, I won't eat then." "And you don't want to sleep with me tonight either?" she added. That hit the mark. He froze, looking at her with indecision. He didn't want to let go of Ellie, but he also didn't want to give up sleeping with her. While he hesitated, Alara saw her chance. She pushed him back and scrambled out of his arms, taking a few steps back. Taking advantage of his current obedience, she commanded him, "Now, go stand in the corner." He looked at her, utterly betrayed. "Ellie, you're really going to punish me?" "Ellie, when are we going to eat? I'm so hungry, so hungry." Alara had him figured out now. She wasn't falling for his act. She maintained her stern posture, showing no signs of softening. "You know the consequences." The little horns that had just perked up now drooped again. Can I stand in the corner by the door?" Her goal was just to get him to stop clinging to her, so she agreed. "Fine." A couple of minutes later, after she'd finished cleaning up the kitchen, Alara glanced toward the doorway. A certain succubus was standing there obediently, but his eyes were glued to her, looking like he was ready to pounce at any moment. Fearing she'd send the wrong signal, Alara quickly looked away and focused on her work. She pulled up her datapad and got started. After a little while, she heard a faint scratching sound from the door. She turned back to see Kian scratching at the doorframe. His eyes were bright red, but he didn't dare make a sound. The tall man stood hunched over, a low, animalistic growl rumbling in his throat as he clawed helplessly at the wood. "He's only like this because he's sick," she thought. "It's not really his fault." Just as her resolve began to waver, he noticed her looking. After suffering in silence for so long, he finally burst out, "When are we going to eat?" She snapped back to reality. "In a little while?" That made him even more frantic. He stomped his feet. "But I'm so hungry, so hungry." "I don't think you're hungry," she said, her face completely straight. "I think you're just hungry for kisses." She glanced at the last few tasks on her screen and gave him a specific time. "Give me 10 more minutes." Thump. He lightly bonked his head against the doorframe and went back to miserably scratching and waiting. Alara stifled a laugh and forced herself to look away, getting back to work. Meanwhile, back on the first star, Duke Arden sat in his office, lost in a heavy silence. It wasn't until his secretary came in with documents to sign that he snapped out of it. He frowned and looked up. Has Kian always been this dependent on Alara Vance? The secretary paused, surprised by the question. "Well, Dr. Vance is his personal medical officer and special assistant. It's natural that he's become accustomed to her care. I would assume it's within a normal range, sir." The Duke almost said more, but bit his tongue for the sake of his pride, letting out a cold scoff instead. "Accustomed?" From what I heard over the comm, he was clinging to her like a wife. He acts like a perfect gentleman in public, but the moment he has an episode, he becomes this utter embarrassment. He couldn't stand his son being this way. He immediately issued an order to dispatch a ship to Cygnus and bring him home. Alara was replying to a message when a notification from Duke Arden popped up on her screen. She opened it and froze. Assistant Vance, prepare to talk Kian down. I have dispatched a warship from the first star. It will arrive on Cygnus this afternoon. She read the first half of the message, talk Kian down, over and over. After a long pause, she typed back, does this mean I am not to return to the first star with the commander? My meaning is the commander's current condition makes it difficult for him to be separated from me. The Duke's reply came quickly, which is why you, assistant, need to find a way to make him leave. Alara stared at the message, speechless. She started to type a reply several times, but then she glanced at Kian, who was still scratching at the door, and pressed her lips together, swallowing her anger. He immediately looked up at the sound of her approaching, and his little horns shot up excitedly. He panted, complaining, I waited for you for so long. She looked at his twitching horns and found them strangely endearing. She couldn't resist reaching out and giving one a little pat. The thought that the Duke's ship was coming to take him away this afternoon left a strange feeling in her stomach. Weren't you hungry? What do you want for lunch? His tail started wagging excitedly. A woo, something sweet. Okay, I'll make it for you, she said, her mind already racing. When that ship arrives, how am I going to convince him to get on it and leave? Fearing Kian would throw a fit if he didn't see her for too long, Alara quickly prepared lunch. As she was setting the table, he followed her into the dining room. Can you grab the silverware for me? She asked casually. When he returned with the utensils, he looked at her with puppy dog eyes, practically begging for praise. She couldn't help but give his head a pat. Only then did he sit down beside her contentedly. Ellie's cooking is the best. The meal went smoothly. Afterwards, Alara had to stop him. Kian, she said seriously, there's something I need to tell you. He speared a strawberry and held it out to her, then popped another one into his mouth before asking, what is it? The strawberry he gave her was incredibly sweet. She took a bite and continued, a warship is coming to pick us up, you and me, and take us back to the first star. He repeated the key phrase. Ellie is coming back with me? Not daring to meet his eyes, she looked down and finished the other half of the strawberry. Taking that as a promise, Kian nodded, not thinking much of it, and went back to his strawberries. A while later, the low hum of a warship's engine filled the air above the estate. By then, Alara had already packed Kian's suitcase. As she brought it out of the room, he asked, confused, Where's yours, Ellie? She paused. I forgot. She went back to her room and, for the sake of appearances, dragged out her own suitcase. I'll help you! Before she could react, Kian had snatched the suitcase from her hand. With one in each arm, he bounded down the stairs. When Adjutant Hayes stepped out of the warship's hatch, that was the first thing he saw. He stood there, jaw agape, unable to believe that this was his commander. Alara pretended not to notice the adjutant's expression as Kian took her hand and led her onto the ship. A few minutes later, she brought him to the sleeping quarters. Seeing her lead him straight to the bed, he thought for a moment, then blinked at her. Ellie, are we going to take a nap now? A slight blush colored her cheeks. She cleared her throat. Yes. When you wake up, we should be back on the first star. The words were barely out of her mouth before he eagerly tackled her onto the bed. Kian! Was all she managed to get out before his lips were on hers. His tail wrapped around her affectionately, the tip twitching with joy. He held her close, planting little kisses on her lips like a small animal, creating a strange mix of innocent and wanton that left her reeling. It took all her willpower to push at his shoulders and mumble against his sweet-tasting lips. Okay, Kian, let's just sleep now. He let out a reluctant whimper, but despite his disappointment, he listened and settled down beside her. He buried his face against her, inhaling her scent, and slowly drifted off to sleep. What he didn't know was that as soon as she was sure he was sound asleep, Alara carefully unwound his arms and tail from around her, slipped out of the room, and sealed the door with a data lock. She saw Adjutant Hayes waiting outside. Let me know when the commander arrives, she said quietly. He nodded, and Alara walked off the warship without looking back. Alara stood outside for a long time. In less than 24 hours, she had, surprisingly, grown accustomed to the clingy succubus. But a rational part of her knew the truth. That was Kian when he was sick. It wasn't the real Kian. She pushed the thoughts from her mind and threw herself back into her work on Cygnus. She lost track of time until her comm suddenly rang. Seeing the caller ID, Commander Kian, her breath caught. She instinctively answered. A series of loud, frantic bangs, followed by Kian's panicked voice. Ellie, I can't find you. Where did you go? Commander, calm down. Adjutant Hayes pleaded in the background. Stop hitting the door, you'll hurt yourself. A lump formed in Alara's throat. It took her a few seconds to find her voice. She tried to soothe him, but the moment he heard her, he broke down completely. Is Ellie abandoning me again? Why? I was so good for you. Commander, please, calm down. Hayes tried again. Get away from me, Kian roared, shoving him aside. Suddenly, the line filled with static. The last thing Alara heard was Kian yelling at the adjutant before the call was forcibly disconnected. Worried sick, she immediately tried to call back, but the line wouldn't connect. After several failed attempts, she gave up and waited for news. It was 2 hours later when Adjutant Hayes finally called back. Dr. Vance, the commander has arrived at the research facility. He's unconscious. Professor Sterling is running diagnostics now. There was nothing she could do. I understand, she said. For the next few days, Alara kept her comm on at all times, terrified she'd miss a call from Kian. But by the time she finished her work on Cygnus and returned to the first star, he still hadn't called. It was evening when she left the main hospital building. A sleek shuttle parked outside caught her eye. It looked familiar. As she got closer, she saw him through the transparent canopy door. Kian, dressed in a crisp, clean uniform, was leaning back in his seat with his eyes closed. Is he here waiting for me? She hesitated, wondering if she should knock. Just then, as if sensing her gaze, he opened his eyes and stared directly at her. Assistant Vance, you've returned from Cygnus and didn't think to submit a debriefing report to me at military command? My apologies, she replied. It was an oversight on my part. I just finished a major surgery and hadn't had a chance to notify you. She sighed internally. Yep, he's back to normal. I can't expect the conscious commander to have any patience for me. Get in, he ordered. Under his intense gaze, she had no choice but to open the door and slide into the pilot's seat. She fastened her seatbelt and turned to him. Where to, Commander? He leaned back further into his seat. Find a place to eat. Ilara blinked. So he waited all this time just to have me take him to dinner? She chose a restaurant that suited his tastes. During the meal, she saw a dish she wanted near his side of the table, and said without thinking, Kian, could you pass that over? The man who had been eating with slow, deliberate movements froze. He raised an eyebrow and looked at her. What did you just say? It hit her instantly. She had just casually ordered her boss around. The look he was giving her might as well have been asking, Assistant Vance, have you lost your mind? I'm sorry, she said immediately. He didn't say anything, but he did pass her the dish. Then, as if returning the favor, he placed a different plate in front of her. Assistant, he said with perfect fairness, peel my shrimp. As she peeled, she gritted her teeth. So much for the cute, clingy succubus. That was all an illusion. This is the real him, a damn bureaucrat who loves nothing more than exploiting his poor assistant. Suddenly, Kian placed a piece of fish on her plate. She stared at it, stunned. All the bones had been removed. Is this really my exploitative boss? Just then he spoke again, his tone casual. Assistant, my father said he's found the woman I was with that night. Alara, who had just taken a bite, nearly choked. She grabbed a napkin and wiped her mouth, then slowly turned to face him. Really? He didn't look pleased. The handsome lines of his face were sharp and cold. I saw a photo, he said flatly. It's not her. Hearing that, Alara frowned, a strange feeling twisting in her gut. Does he remember something? She couldn't help but ask, Commander, I thought you didn't remember what happened that night. How would you know if it's her or not? His eyes narrowed slightly. If he's capable of lying to me about it, he's capable of finding a random woman to deceive me with. Alara was silent for a moment, surprised by his clear-headed logic. After a pause, she asked quietly, So, what are you going to do? He looked like he was done with the topic. He leaned back and closing his eyes. He wants me to meet her, he said dismissively. I'll send you her file later. You can make the arrangements, Assistant. Alara froze. I'm making the arrangements? Is there a problem? Kian asked coolly. Tightness spread through her chest. After a moment, she said, Commander, perhaps you should have someone else handle this. He opened his eyes and looked at her, clearly not understanding. I'm rather busy for the next few days, she said, making up an excuse. Are you joking with me, Assistant? His tone implied that, as his special assistant, her failure to prioritize his affairs was completely out of line. Alara was silent for a long time, unable to find a suitable reason to refuse. What do I do? I can't maintain a professional distance from him anymore. I can't keep doing this job. It's time to leave. The next day, following the Duke's instructions, Alara arranged for Kian and a woman named Seraphina Song to meet at a lavish banquet hosted by Lord Rowan. Unlike Alara, who spent her days in the military, Seraphina was from a prominent noble family on the first star. Dressed to the nines, she stood out at the party with the effortless grace of a true socialite. a beautiful sight to behold. While the two were exchanging pleasantries, Alara slipped away from the bustling crowd. Kian noticed her leaving. What's gotten into her? He wondered. Just then, Alara spoke. I won't interrupt you two any longer. I'll take my leave now. He immediately reached out and grabbed her arm, his voice low and irritated. Where are you going? She paused. Commander, I have other work to attend to. We're going riding at Lord Rowan's stables later, he told her. You're coming with me. She didn't agree right away. Isn't Miss Song with you? What does that have to do with me telling you to be there? He retorted. Alara pressed her lips together. Fine, she thought. It's just for one more day. Later at the stables, Alara looked around. What's taking him so long? Did he run off? Just as she was about to ask a stable hand, Kian emerged from the changing room. She was used to seeing him in his military uniform and was momentarily stunned. Dressed in a form-fitting white riding habit, the already tall and handsome man now exuded a natural, gentlemanly elegance that seemed to belong only to the nobility. As if sensing her stare, he looked right at her. He suddenly took her wrist, and with a soft click, something cool fastened around it. Alara looked down. Kian had taken off his own watch and put it on her. She recognized it. It was the same one he'd sent her all the way back from Ethel to find. He held her hand, noticing how much thinner her wrist was than he'd imagined, slender but well-defined. The watch strap hung loosely. The moment he let go, it slid down her arm, a surprisingly sensual sight. He lifted her hand again, pushed the watch back into place, and measured her wrist with his large hand. Mine's too big, he concluded. Hearing his matter-of-fact tone, Alara felt a strange heat rise in her cheeks. She quickly pulled her hand away. Why did you put your watch on me? Keep it safe for me, he said. Ah, she thought, so he was just worried about losing it while riding. He wants me to hold on to it. Just then, a few other nobles came over and invited Kian to join them on the track. He mounted his horse and rode off with them. With nothing else to do, Alara watched him circle the track. As she was focused on him, Seraphina's voice came from behind her. Alara turned to see the tall, slender woman leaning against the railing, looking her up and down. Assistant Vance? She said slyly. Are you and Commander Kian having some kind of secret office romance? You're mistaken, Miss Song, Alara replied, her face a blank mask. Seraphina followed her gaze back to the track. Really? The way you look at him seems rather special. Alara frowned, about to say something, but Seraphina just shrugged. I can tell the commander isn't interested in me, and frankly, we're both just going through the motions for our families. Whatever is going on between you two, I'm fine with it. Alara knew Kian's situation well enough. What she didn't understand was Seraphina's. May I ask, Miss Song, why you agreed to the Duke's arrangement in the first place? Seraphina just smiled. That's a personal secret, assistant. I can't tell you that. Alara had no desire to get involved in the affairs of noble circles. In that case, I'll be going. I won't disturb you any further. She turned and walked away. Sometime later, Alara was back at home. She had just sat down on the sofa and taken a few sips of water when a call from Duke Arden came through. She wasn't surprised and answered calmly. The Duke, however, was not calm. Assistant Vance, you're resigning? He asked, his voice sharp with displeasure. I am only resigning from the position of special assistant, she corrected him. In the event of a military conflict, I will still serve as the commander's medical officer on his warship. I need a reason, he said, his anger barely contained. Duke Arden, since you have already arranged a marriage for the commander, surely you don't expect me to be the one by his side the next time his susceptible period is triggered? I am, after all, just an assistant. Don't you agree? After she said this, the Duke fell silent, as if he had only just considered this angle. From a moral standpoint, it did put her in an incredibly difficult position. But he didn't give up, trying a different tactic. Kian has grown accustomed to you being by his side these past 2 years. If you suddenly leave, he may not take it well. The commander is merely accustomed to having an assistant, Alara said calmly. Please don't worry, Duke. I have already compiled a list of suitable candidates with excellent qualifications. I will send it to you for your review shortly. At that, the Duke finally understood. Alara had truly prepared for everything. Are you certain about this, assistant? Yes, I am. This time, he didn't try to persuade her further. To avoid any more disturbances, Alara switched her comm to Do Not Disturb and went to bed. The Duchess entered the study. This is all your fault. You were so arrogant and disrespectful, of course she couldn't stand the humiliation. The Duke frowned. I just felt Kian was becoming too dependent on her. I thought bringing in the song girl would be a good distraction. How was I supposed to think of everything? The Duchess turned to leave in a huff. If something happens to our son while he's in his succubus state, we'll see what you do then. My lady, don't be angry, the Duke called after her, rubbing his temples. The next morning, Alara woke up early as usual. For once, she didn't have to go to work. She was about to call her parents in Ethel when she opened her comm and saw several missed calls, all from Kian. She hesitated for a moment, then called him back. He answered almost instantly. His voice was as calm and steady as ever, with just a hint of cool detachment. "Assistant Vance, you're late today." When she didn't respond, he continued, "However, your superior is a patient man. I will forgive you this once. Come over and prepare my breakfast now. I'm very hungry." Assuming the Duke hadn't told him about her resignation, she explained it to him again. There was a few seconds of silence, and then his voice turned to ice. He used her full name. "Alara Vance, you resigned by going directly over your superior's head?" "Commander," she had to remind him, "I was hired by the Duke in the first place." He wasn't listening. "Why?" he demanded coldly. "Why? I can't exactly tell you. It's because your father has already found you a fiancé, and as the assistant you've slept with, it's completely inappropriate for me to stay by your side." As she was trying to think of what to say, his deep voice came again. "If you're not going to be my assistant, whose assistant are you going to be?" "I'm not going to be anyone's assistant," she explained with a sigh. "I am still your ship's medical officer, just not your special assistant anymore." A few moments after she finished speaking, he ended the call. Alara took a moment to compose herself, then sent a quick message to her parents. A couple of days later, after tying up loose ends at the Central Military Hospital, she took some time off and went back to Ethel to visit her family, finally giving herself a real vacation. They were at the mall when a piercing gunshot rang out from outside. Panic erupted, and the crowd began to scream and scatter. Alara looked up and saw intruders on the upper levels. "What's happening? Ellie, your father is still outside," her mother cried, about to run out to find her husband. Alara quickly pulled her back. "Mom, you hide inside the mall. I'll go find Dad." She immediately activated her comm and sent out a distress signal. "Rebel militants at the Locust Starlight Mall, requesting backup." It seemed the militants were well prepared for the local response team's weaponry. A prolonged standoff would be dangerous. "I hope backup from the First Star gets here soon." As if on cue, an advanced warship from the First Star appeared in the sky above. In the blink of an eye, powerful interstellar weapons deployed, neutralizing all of the militants. Alara recognized it instantly. It was the flagship of the First Star's fleet, Commander Kian's warship. A shuttle descended slowly. The hatch opened, and Commander Kian, tall and imposing in his immaculate uniform, stepped out. His gaze swept over the crowd, pausing for a fraction of a second. Alara wasn't sure if he'd seen her before he was surrounded by local government forces. She forced herself to look away. Just as she was about to ask someone about her father, he ran toward her. "Ellie, are you okay? Where's your mother?" he asked anxiously. "I came out to find you. Mom's safe inside the mall," she replied. "Dad, you go find her. I'll stay here and help the wounded." He understood the urgency of the situation, nodded, and rushed into the mall. There were many injured people. Alara showed her military medic credentials to the rescue workers, grabbed her personal med kit, and joined the effort. To her surprise, she ran into Caden Fu at the scene. As she was bandaging a wound on his arm, he told her, "I was just here on a business trip. What about you, Dr. Vance?" "I brought my parents out for a little getaway." As she spoke, she heard footsteps behind her. She looked up to see Adjutant Hayes approaching. He gave her a hesitant look. "Dr. Vance, the commander requests your presence." She paused halfway through her work. "Now?" "Yes," the adjutant confirmed. Hayden took the bandage from her hand. "You go ahead, I can finish this myself." She nodded and reminded him, "Try not to get it wet." Alara made her way to the command room on the ship. Kian was inside, studying information on a large screen. He turned as she entered and looked at her steadily. "You are still my ship's medical officer." She found his statement a bit odd. "Yes. I'm injured," he stated calmly. She blinked, then walked over to him with her medkit. "Where are you injured, Commander?" He pointed to his chest. After a moment's hesitation, Alara knelt before him and, keeping her eyes downcast, began to unbutton his uniform. She opened his shirt and saw a fresh wound on his chest. It was a strange, crisscrossing mark. She examined it closely but couldn't identify the cause. It definitely wasn't from the recent skirmish. She couldn't help but look up. "Commander, how did this happen?" His hands were resting properly on his lap. He looked down at her but didn't answer her question, asking one of his own instead. "What is your relationship with that man from before?" "A new friend." Seeing that he wouldn't tell her, she didn't press the issue and began treating the wound. "Does it hurt?" He was still stuck on the previous question. "No, why were you together with a new friend?" "We just happened to run into each other in Locust. We weren't together." She suddenly realized how strange their back and forth was and pressed her lips together. "And it has nothing to do with you, Commander." She focused on treating his wound. As she applied the final bandage, she had to lean in closer. She lost her balance and almost fell into his lap, but he caught her, his hand steadying her back. His chest was warm, his powerful heartbeat drumming against her cheek, making her skin tingle. Just as she started to pull away, he held her there. "Don't move," he said, his voice low and magnetic, completely devoid of emotion. "These past few days have been rough." Alara froze. "Why?" "Because you weren't by my side," he reported, his voice flat. Unsure what to say, she pushed him away. She glanced at him awkwardly and saw he was still staring at her. She cleared her throat. "Commander, I should go. My parents are waiting for me. I need to arrange for them to get back to Ethel." He paused. "They can take my warship back. That won't be necessary." Adhering to the principle of keeping things simple, she declined his offer and left the ship. Kian watched her leave, his expression calm. After a moment of serious thought, he opened his datapad. His long fingers typed into the search bar, "Islands suitable for imprisoning someone." The moment he hit search, his AI detected his thought process and issued an immediate warning. "Master, your immediate brainwave activity has been detected. This is a reminder that false imprisonment is a criminal offense in the Federation Empire." Kian didn't seem to think there was anything wrong or crazy about his idea. It was only the law of the Federation that forced him to suppress the urge to lock Alara away. He calmly asked, "In that case, what are the legal methods for keeping my assistant by my side?" The AI quickly responded, "Based on your query, the following legitimate methods have been found. 1. Give Alara Vance a raise. 2. Marry Alara Vance." Kian automatically dismissed the first option, which had already failed. The second novel idea seemed to pique his interest. He raised an eyebrow. It was evening by the time Alara got her parents safely back to Ethel. She went to her room and took a shower. Suddenly, she thought of the commander. He had been acting so strangely today. Something felt off. She was exhausted from the day's events. Not long after her shower, she wanted to go to sleep. As she was getting into her pajamas, her hand came to rest on her stomach. Her fingers paused. She looked down at her flat abdomen and suddenly realized that at some point, both of her hands had moved to gently cradle it. The subconscious gesture startled her. "What's wrong with me? Why would I do that?" She patted her cheeks. "I must be overtired. I just need to sleep." The next morning, Alara was still half asleep when a shrill comm call woke her. Her fingers fumbled with the screen a few times before she finally answered. "Hello?" Her voice was soft and groggy, completely different from her usual crisp tone. There was a moment of silence on the other end before Kian spoke. "Assistant Vance, are you sleeping?" Hearing his voice, Alara was instantly awake. "I just woke up. Is there something you need, Commander?" He said. "The watch I had you hold on to last time. Did you forget to return it?" "The watch?" It took her a moment to remember which one he was talking about. She rubbed her eyes. "I thought I put it back on your shuttle." "You did not," he replied. "Weren't you back in Ethel around that time? Perhaps you left it at your house?" "Why would I take the commander's watch home with me? It's huge. I can't even wear it," she grumbled under her breath as she got out of bed and started searching her luggage, determined to prove him wrong. It was the first time Kian had ever heard her sound so petulant. He paused. "Assistant Vance, are you not a morning person?" She froze, realizing her tone had been out of line. "My apologies," she said, composing herself. He didn't sound offended at all. In fact, there was a hint of a smile in his voice. "It's fine. Did you find it?" She was about to say no when she found it, tucked away in the pocket of a uniform jacket. She stared at the watch hanging from her fingers, then finally managed a dry, "I found it." In reality, Kian had deliberately put it there. "Good," he said, his voice taking on a low, lingering tone. "I'm coming to your house to pick it up now." That woke her up completely. "Wait," she said quickly. "I'm at my family's house in Ethel." "I know. Be outside in 5 minutes to let me in." Without waiting for a reply, he hung up. On the paved road outside her family's estate, Alara saw a small private shuttle parked. Kian had just stepped out. "Did you come alone, Commander?" she asked, looking behind him, but she didn't see Adjutant Hayes or anyone else. He nodded, then tilted his chin, indicating for her to lead the way. As she led him into the estate grounds, Kian's gaze swept over the property, his expression cold and critical. "I'm not fond of the decor. Too many roses." Alara was speechless. "This is my home. Whether you like it or not is irrelevant." He frowned at that, his lips parting and closing a few times before he reluctantly conceded, "I suppose I could get used to it." She had no idea what he was talking about, so she just kept quiet. Inside, she got him a pair of slippers. They had just stepped into the foyer when her parents came to greet them. Her mother was especially enthusiastic. "My baby has told me so much about you, Commander. It's so wonderful to finally meet you." Her mother had barely finished speaking when Kian latched onto a certain keyword. He raised an eyebrow and looked at Alara. At her age, being called baby by her parents in front of an outsider was mortifying. She cleared her throat loudly, cutting her mother off. I'm just going upstairs to get something. Kian smoothly followed her lead. As it happens, there's a work matter I'd like to discuss with you in person. Could you show me to your study? Hearing that, her parents, fearing they were delaying official business, quickly shooed them upstairs. The moment Alara led him into the study and closed the door, Kian tilted his head, a thoughtful look on his face. Baby, he said. Her face flushed. Don't call me that. I'll go get the watch. You can wait here. She turned to leave, but he grabbed her wrist and effortlessly pulled her in front of him, his warm breath ghosting over her forehead. The sudden movement made her stumble, and she instinctively grabbed his uniform to steady herself. He looked down at her. I have something more important to discuss with you. Let go first, she said, her breath catching. His handsome face was suddenly so close and his intense gaze made her feel dizzy. Right, he said and let her go. He then casually sat down in her desk chair, pulled up a file on the screen, and took a calm sip of water. Assistant Vance, I'd like you to consider this. What is this? She murmured, her words dying in her throat as she read the first line. At the same time, Kian's deep, magnetic voice spoke again. Marry me. Alara stared at the contract, stunned. After a long moment, she looked up. Commander, are you joking? He met her gaze. Do you think I would come all the way to your home just to play a joke on you? Then may I ask why? She asked, completely bewildered. Come here, he said. She hesitated, then walked over to the desk. He stood up, grabbed her wrists, and pinned them against the edge of the desk behind her. He leaned in, his face slowly moving closer to hers. She instinctively leaned back, her eyes tracing the strong lines of his brow, down his straight nose, to the sharp curve of his lips. She thought he was going to kiss her. The powerful masculine energy radiating from him made her eyelashes tremble. He seemed to be holding back, his nose brushing against her ear, the urge to bite her almost palpable. The next second, she couldn't take it anymore and pushed at him. His Adam's apple bobbed. He finally seemed to come to his senses and pulled back slightly from the scent that was uniquely hers. He looked down and explained, because when you're not with me, I can't function properly. I asked Professor Sterling before I came. He said it's because the succubus crystal in my body has grown accustomed to your presence. So, will you marry me? Her lips parted, her expression grim. He was saying words that should have sounded romantic, but his tone was completely businesslike, as if she were simply an indispensable component of his life and work. Thinking she was dissatisfied, he added, You can name any terms you want as long as they are within my power to grant. And even if they aren't, I will do everything I can to satisfy you. She suppressed her emotions. But aren't you supposed to be marrying Miss Song? I have no intention of marrying anyone else, he replied. And I have no intention of marrying anyone, including you, Commander, she stated, her face a blank mask. Kian was silent for a long time. He took a half step back, looking at her with genuine confusion. Why wouldn't you want to marry me? My family is quite wealthy. While my family might not be in the same league as your capital city elite, we're well established in Ethel. I don't need to sell myself into a marriage with you, she explained, trying to keep the discomfort out of her voice. His every word makes me feel like a tool. It's so unnerving. My family isn't lacking anything. I have no reason to give in to this man. At that, Kian's expression slowly hardened, his lips pressed into a thin line. The atmosphere grew awkward. I'll go get the watch, she said, breaking the silence. Without her calming presence, the succubus crystal inside him began to stir. He tugged at his collar, his expression turning cold, a wild, animalistic glint appearing in his eyes. He opened his datapad and, knowing full well he shouldn't, issued a command. I'm about to break the law. AI, use any means necessary to bring Alara Vance to me. I want her by my side for the rest of her life. When Alara returned with the watch, Kian was gone. She went downstairs to ask her parents. The commander said he had urgent business at headquarters and had to leave, her mother told her, looking confused. Her father, more observant, looked concerned. Baby, did you two say something you shouldn't have? The commander looked upset when he left. It's nothing, Alara started to say, but then for some reason, she was overcome with a wave of nausea and gagged. Baby, what's wrong? Are you sick? Her parents asked, worried. Do we have any medicine? Should we go to the hospital? I'm fine, don't worry, she said and walked out. Suddenly, a strange scent hit her nose. As a military doctor, she instantly recognized it as a knockout agent. Before she could react, she was unconscious. When she woke up, hours had passed. She was in Kian's bedroom. A jolt of panic shot through her. She tried to get up, but her limbs were weak and unresponsive. Just then, the sound of the shower stopped. Alara held her breath. The bathroom door opened, and Kian, with only a robe loosely draped over his shoulders, walked toward the bed. He leaned over her, his tall frame looming above. "You're awake." "Commander?" she demanded. "Did you have me drugged and kidnapped?" "Yes," he admitted without hesitation. His hands were braced on either side of her. She tensed, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Do you know that this is a crime?" He looked down at her, his deep eyes fixed on hers for a long moment before he answered with a hint of petulance. "You wouldn't marry me." His tone, as if she were the one at fault, was unbelievable. "Because I wouldn't marry you?" She tried to lift her hands to push him away, but he pinned her wrists down. She struggled for a moment, but he was too strong. She took a deep breath and reprimanded him. "That is not a reason to kidnap and drug me. Do you have any idea that I could have you arrested for this?" "I know," he said. The web of his thumb and forefinger circled her slender wrist. He stroked it once or twice, then calmly laid out his entire criminal plan. "I can lock you up and sleep with you until you're pregnant. Once that happens, you won't be able to leave me." His words terrified her. "Whose idea was this, Commander?" "Wasn't it yours?" Kian lifted her wrist and bit open the cuff of her sleeve. "You refuse to be my assistant, and you refuse to marry me. I have no choice but to break the law." The button on her cuff popped off and the fabric fell away, revealing the pale skin of her wrist. He stared at it for a moment, then couldn't resist leaning down and nuzzling her, marking her with his unique succubus scent. His gaze then landed on her flushed lips. "Assistant, your lips look very kissable," he said, and leaned in to find out. Her hands were pinned and she couldn't push him away. Just as his lips were about to touch hers, a wave of nausea rose in her chest. She couldn't stop it. She turned her head and dry heaved several times. The man above her froze. After a long, silent moment, he spoke, his voice ice cold. "Do I disgust you that much, assistant? So much that you have to vomit in my face?" Alara knew how infuriating her reaction must have been. She was about to say, "It wasn't on purpose," but the next second, Kian, deeply offended, collapsed on top of her. He just stared down at her, clearly angry and upset. She pressed her lips together. If she didn't calm him down now, there was no telling what he might do next. She made an excuse. "My stomach has been upset today." At her words, the man's ears twitched. He shot her a cold glance, then, without a word, lifted her from the bed. He settled her firmly in his lap, his angry glare still fixed on her. The position was awkward, and when she struggled, he just held her tighter, his grip possessive and unyielding. After a moment, she had no choice but to try and soothe the giant dog. "Don't be like this." "Like what?" he growled. She gently tugged at his robe, trying to reason with him. "I can come back and be your assistant again." Hearing that, he narrowed his eyes, looking down at her like a predator sizing up its prey. "How do I know you're not lying to me?" Her head was starting to ache. "We can sign a new contract. Will that be enough?" He didn't answer right away. Sensing his hesitation, she played her last card, her voice soft and vulnerable. "Commander, I don't want this. Are you really going to force yourself on me?" He saw the faint redness tinging her usually cool eyes, as if he had finally pushed her too far. He frowned, a hint of reluctance in his expression, and finally relented. "Then you'll have to let me lock you up first." Before she could process what that meant, she heard a soft click. Kian had pulled a pair of chain handcuffs from the bedside table and fastened them around her wrists. She looked down, confused, at her shackled hands. A moment later, she heard his voice from above her. "I had them custom-made to your wrist size. I haven't had a chance to put them on you yet." He measured her bound wrists with his hand. "A perfect fit," he said, satisfied. Alara looked up, her face a mixture of red and white. "So, Commander, when you put that watch on me the other day, you were already planning to imprison me? How else would you know my exact wrist size and have these humiliating things made for me?" He didn't confirm or deny it. He placed her back on the bed. "I'm going to draft a new contract. You will wait for me here." She watched him leave, leaving her chained to the bed. She had never imagined finding herself in such a situation. But right now, to keep him from losing his mind and going through with his plan, she had to play along, enduring the humiliation of being locked up like this. About half an hour later, Kian returned. He had printed out the contract for her to review. With the chains still on her wrists, she swallowed her pride and read it carefully. As she did, Kian's eyes were fixed on her hands, on the way the cuffs clinked together as she moved. He stared at her beautiful hands, lost in thought. After a while, she finished. She had no issue with most of the terms, except for one. In the event of any agitation of the commander's succubus crystal, the assistant must, under all circumstances, return to the commander's side to provide a calming influence. "Yes," Kian nodded. "That part is very important." She pressed her lips together, clearly reluctant. He saw her hesitation and narrowed his eyes again. "Do you have a problem with that, assistant?" She met his intense gaze and her resolve crumbled. "No, I'm fine with it. I'll sign." He meticulously checked her signature twice before he was satisfied. Alara couldn't stand it anymore. "Can I go home now?" she pleaded. He glanced out the window. "It's late." "I still want to go home," she insisted, a rare stubbornness in her voice. He looked at the firm set of her jaw, then raised an eyebrow. "Fine," he agreed. He unlocked the handcuffs. Just as she was about to leave, his hand shot out, grabbing hers and pulling her into his arms. Alara stumbled into his chest. He caught her, his hand steady on her back. He leaned down. "Assistant, may I kiss you?" She was about to say no, but he continued. "I'm going to be separated from you for an entire night. If we could have some intimate contact now, it would provide a greater calming effect." Her eye twitched, using such a legitimate-sounding reason to be a creep. Is there no justice in the world? From the look on his face, she knew she wasn't leaving without agreeing. Whatever. Her silence was all the permission he needed. He cupped the back of her head and kissed her, his lips serious and focused. Alara suddenly felt that this kiss was different from the others. She was about to say something, but he just tilted her chin and kissed her again. When he finally pulled away, he was in a noticeably better mood. "I'll take you home." Alara stood there, stunned, her fingers gently touching her lips in disbelief. Later, Kian flew her home in his private shuttle. Even after she was back in her room, watching his ship disappear into the night sky, the whole day felt surreal, like a strange dream. But the faint warmth still lingering on her lips told her it had all been real. Kian really had been on the verge of imprisoning her to have his child. At the thought of a child, she looked down, her hand coming to rest on her abdomen again. She didn't know if it was just her imagination, but for the past few days her stomach had felt. She tried to calm herself, hoping it was all in her head. The next morning, before heading to the hospital, she sent Kian a message, not wanting him to wonder where she was. "I have a personal matter to attend to this morning and won't be able to accompany you to headquarters. Adjutant Hayes can assist you with anything you need. I've already sent him your updated schedule." A moment after she hit send, her comm rang. "Assistant, what is this personal matter?" "It's just something private," she replied. He paused. "Will you be coming to pick me up from headquarters this afternoon?" She could almost picture him frowning with displeasure. A small smile touched her lips. "I will." "Good," he said, his mood instantly improving, and hung up. Why does it feel like the normal him is starting to act more and more like the succubus him? She wondered. Later, she went to the hospital and told the director she was there for a routine checkup. Not wanting any of her colleagues involved, she locked herself in an examination room and ran a pregnancy test on herself. As she waited for the results, she stared at the slowly processing data on the screen. The lights dimmed and the final report appeared. Her eyes followed the numbers, then froze on the diagnosis. Early stage intrauterine pregnancy. She stared at the words, unable to process them for a long, long time. I'm really pregnant? The next morning, Kian handed her a contract. "You have 1 hour. Take Miss Song here and have her sign the deed to this winery. Come back as soon as it's done." Alara's expression darkened. It took a moment for her to compose herself, to stop herself from asking, "Are you giving her a winery? Is Seraphina Song that important to you? You got me pregnant and now you want me to go serve your mistress?" No, she thought. It's not his fault. He doesn't know. With that, she went downstairs. 20 minutes later, the shuttle arrived at the winery. Alara handed the prepared contract to Seraphina. "Miss Song, if there are no objections, please sign here." "You're so cold today, Assistant Vance." "I like it," Seraphina said with a smirk. She signed her name and handed it back. Alara gave it a quick glance. "It's all in order. If there's nothing else—" Before she could finish, Seraphina's comm rang. Alara had no intention of eavesdropping, but Seraphina made no effort to step away, taking the call right in front of her. "I see your brother has time for an office romance with his subordinate. If you're really that busy, then don't bother coming to see me. That's it." She ended the call abruptly. For some reason, Alara felt like the comment was aimed at her. Is she talking about me? She looked at Seraphina for a moment. "You have a boyfriend?" Seraphina examined her long fingers and licked a fingertip. Of course. Thinking of how Kian still believed Seraphina was the woman from his first night, Alara felt a complicated mix of emotions. "Miss Song, aren't you afraid I'll tell the commander?" Seraphina just smiled at her. "Go ahead, say whatever you want. I don't care." With that complicated feeling still churning inside her, Alara returned to headquarters and placed the signed contract on Kian's desk. He looked up from his work. "Is it done?" "Yes," she said. He stared at her. "I helped Seraphina acquire that winery, and she told me the truth. It wasn't her that night. We are merely business partners." Alara stiffened, surprised by the revelation. Kian's dark eyes met hers. "If I were to give a gift like that, it would only be to you, Assistant. And the only person I want to marry is you." My previous actions may have been misleading. That was my mistake. But Alara Vance, if you ever dare to look at me with disgust and vomit on me again, I will not be so forgiving." He then tilted his chin, assuming his full, authoritative demeanor. "Come here." She only hesitated for a second. "Could we really be together? This time I want to try." She walked over, and before he could start reprimanding her, she sat down on his lap. The words died on his lips. He tried to act composed as he placed a hand on her waist to steady her. Alara lowered her gaze, meeting his. I was ready to keep my distance from him forever, but what he just said, it makes me think he might not be what I thought. Maybe he does care about my feelings. Suddenly, she reached up and touched his face. Her fingertips traced the rim of his gold-rimmed glasses, then slid down to hook the chain, pulling them from his face. Without them, his gaze seemed less cold. "Commander Kian," she said, her voice formal. As she spoke, her finger traced his lips, then moved down to the tightly buttoned collar of his uniform. She undid the top button, her fingers brushing against the sharp curve of his Adam's apple. She looked him straight in the eye like a subordinate asking a very serious question. "Are you seriously trying to start a secret office romance with me?" Alara felt the Adam's apple under her finger bob sharply. His skin was hotter than a normal person's, so hot she felt like she'd been burned. She instinctively tried to pull her hand back, but he caught it, his grip swift and strong like a steel trap, pinning her between his body and the desk. His gaze swept down her body, and everywhere it touched, a shiver ran down her spine. He deliberately leaned in, his warm breath ghosting over her ear. "Assistant, are you trying to seduce me?" Not to be outdone, she straightened her back and leaned in closer, whispering back, "You started it, Commander." His hand on her back began to knead slowly, insistently. He moved to the delicate skin of her neck. "So, are we doing this?" Before she could answer, she felt like a large dog had buried its head against her, its teeth closing around her pulse point, stealing her breath. She could only grip his broad shoulders for support. When he finally let her go, letting her breathe, her neck was covered in love bites. She thought it was over, but he was just giving her a moment's rest before leaning in for another round. A sense of shame finally washed over her. She turned her face away. "Don't you have work to do?" He kept his arm wrapped tightly around her waist, like a proud predator. "I think I'm getting addicted," he stated matter-of-factly. Fearing he was about to start again, she narrowed her eyes and tried to reason with him. "The commander needs to work." He glanced at her disheveled collar and the marks beneath it, clearly not wanting to let her go. "Assistant," he asked suddenly, "have you been drinking milk?" The abrupt change in topic caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" His eyes were fixed on the curve of her chest. "You smell very sweetly of milk," he concluded. Realizing what he meant, her face flushed beet red. Not wanting to argue any longer, she saw an opening, pushed his hands away, and jumped off his lap. He started to say something, but she was already gathering her things. "Work first," she cut him off, tilting her chin up. He raised an eyebrow. "You're getting bold." She was counting on the fact that his succubus crystal now needed her presence to stay stable. She met his gaze without fear. "If the commander is dissatisfied with my performance, he is free to hire a new assistant." At that, he tilted his head, studying her for a long moment. Finally, he looked away, his voice restrained. "I understand," was all he said. Seeing that, Alara made an excuse and slipped into the adjoining lounge. In the bathroom, she pulled down her collar and looked in the mirror. Good Lord, her neck was covered in a constellation of red and purple marks. If she walked out of his office like this, she knew what the entire command center would be thinking. She looked at her reflection, straightened her collar, and fastened every single button. In moments, she was back to being the cool, reserved assistant Vance. But as she did, Kian's words from before echoed in her mind. "You smell very sweetly of milk." She couldn't help but look down at her own chest. "Does it feel a little sore? Is this because I'm lactating?" Just then, Kian's voice came from the office. "Assistant." She dropped her hands and went out. "Yes, Commander?" He looked up from his datapad and saw her buttoned-up collar, hiding all evidence of what had happened. He frowned, clearly displeased. "I want coffee. If you are by my side, my work efficiency will be higher." For the sake of getting off work early, Alara had to agree. After making his coffee, she started helping him organize some files. Suddenly, Kian asked, "Assistant, are you aware that Prince Pavo is getting married next month?" Alara nodded. "Of course." Kian pulled up a video on his datapad. In it, a man was speaking. "Soon I will be joined in matrimony with Princess Ara. She will be my spouse, my wife." Kian pointed to the screen. "Prince Pavo said that after they are wed, Princess Ara will become his spouse, his wife." Ilara answered hesitantly, "Is there a problem with that?" "Wife?" Kian said suddenly, as if testing the word. Her ears instantly turned red. If it weren't for his perfectly serious, scholarly expression, She would have thought he was teasing her. Just as she was trying to form a response, he seemed to have made up his mind. "Wife," he said again, this time with conviction. He looked up, his expression earnest. "Assistant, if we get married in the future, I could call you wife. I personally prefer that title." If anyone else had said that to her, she might have thought it was a proposal. But knowing Kian as she did, she suspected he was simply looking for a new, more pleasant term of address for her. So Alara suppressed the flicker of emotion she'd felt and shut him down coolly. "I personally do not." He looked at her and frowned, then closed his mouth, turned his head, and ignored her. Later that evening, the shuttle was parked outside his estate. As Alara unbuckled her seatbelt, she felt his eyes on her, as if he were waiting for something. "We've arrived at your home. Is there anything else?" He frowned, his gaze slowly dropping to her lips. "Yesterday, before you went home, you kissed me," he stated, clearly dissatisfied. Alara touched her lips. Yesterday, he was the one who insisted on it. Is he really going to demand a goodnight kiss every day now? As she was thinking, he suddenly leaned over, his right hand cupping the back of her neck, and kissed her with practiced ease. Her body tensed for a couple of seconds. Then, as if unwilling to let him control the situation, she grabbed his tie, closed her eyes, and kissed him back fiercely. If he's going to do this, I might as well get something out of it too. The kiss lasted for several minutes. When she was starting to feel breathless, she tried to push him away, but he wouldn't budge. So she bit his lip. That finally made him stop. He stared into her eyes for a moment, then touched his lip, which was on the verge of bleeding. He shot her a sideways glance. "Assistant, could you be a little less rough next time?" Alara just frowned. "That's what you get for not letting go." Suddenly, her comm chimed. She looked down and saw it was a message from the Duchess. Alara was in the kitchen, wearing an apron, chopping vegetables. The apron cinched her waist, making it look incredibly slender, almost begging to be held. Kian thought it, and then he did it. He walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. She jumped, then relaxed when she saw it was him. "I'm almost done. You can go wait outside." "Oh," he said. "That's not what you said yesterday when you were begging me to come with you to the estate." The Duchess had sent Alara a message asking her to bring the commander to the family estate. So she had pleaded with him. "If you don't go, the Duke will surely give me trouble again." Seeing her like that, he couldn't refuse and had reluctantly agreed. Alara wrapped her arms around his neck. "All right. If we don't stop now, we're going to be late." "How are we going to be late?" he murmured, his hand moving to trace her lips. Just as he was about to kiss her, she suddenly turned her head away and gagged. His expression changed instantly. "What's wrong?" She took a moment to catch her breath. Knowing it was her morning sickness, all she could say was, "It's nothing." His face hardened. "So it's my fault again? You're vomiting again?" "It's not because of you," she tried to explain. He was still upset, ready to grill her for answers. "Then what is it?" She pressed her lips together. "I haven't been feeling well these past few days." "Not feeling well?" His eyes slowly moved down to her flat stomach, as if searching for something. "I haven't seen you eat anything out of the ordinary. Why wouldn't you be feeling well?" As he spoke, his long fingers reached out and gently pressed against her abdomen. A shiver ran through her. "Don't touch that!" Not only did he touch it, he deliberately pressed a little harder. "Why not?" he asked, completely unbothered. She pushed his hand away and instinctively covered her stomach. "You just can't," she warned. He raised an eyebrow. "Come and eat," she said, her voice filled with frustration. "We have to go to the estate after this." After their meal, they took the shuttle to the Arden estate. Alara first accompanied Kian to the courtyard to greet the Duke and Duchess. The Duchess was actually Kian's stepmother. She looked at Kian, hesitating before making an excuse to take Alara outside. Kian immediately grabbed Alara's hand, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the Duchess. "Where are you taking her?" The Duchess was a little intimidated by his predatory glare. "I was just going to show Alara the gardens. I won't interrupt your father-son talk." "You weren't interrupting," he said flatly. The Duke frowned. "Are you going to die if you're separated from her for 5 minutes?" Kian was about to retort, but Alara quickly pulled her hand free. "Commander, I'm just going to go pick some ether berries." Hearing that she was going to pick berries for him, he finally relented and let the Duchess lead her away. Once they were in the orchard, the Duchess took Alara's hand. "Alara, it's so good to have you back by Kian's side. On behalf of the Duke, I apologize for what happened before. I hope you won't hold it against us." Of course she held it against them, but her issue was with the situation, not the person. She nodded at the Duchess. The Duchess breathed a sigh of relief, then lowered her voice. "Has Kian been seeing any of the young ladies from the other noble families lately?" She pointed to her own neck. "I saw a mark on his neck just now. It looked quite intense." The culprit herself blushed slightly. her voice a little unsteady. Is that so? The Duchess, oblivious to Alara's discomfort, continued. Alara, dear, you should tell Kian to be a bit more discreet. He's the lead commander of the fleet, after all. It wouldn't do for his subordinates to see things like that. Alara just nodded stiffly and picked a bright red etherberry, popping it into her mouth without thinking. The Duchess was about to say something else when she saw Alara eating the berry. She stopped, stunned. Alara, why are you eating an etherberry? Hearing the Duchess's question, Alara froze too. That's right. As a normal human, I have no reason to be eating etherberries. Could it be because I'm pregnant with a little succubus? She stood there for a moment before managing a weak explanation. I was just tasting it for the commander to see if it's sweet. The Duchess just laughed. It's all right, dear. Eat as many as you like. Alara focused on picking berries for a while. Suddenly, she heard the Duchess call out, Zia, you're back. Alara turned and found herself face to face with Zia, who had just entered the orchard. She didn't know Kian's younger sister very well, only that she had joined the Interstellar Space Agency at a young age and was considered one of the Federation's most promising young scientists. Zia's gaze slowly moved from Alara to the Duchess. Mother, how have you been? The Duchess smiled warmly. I'm well. Your father and brother are in the living room. Shall I take you to them? I'll go in a little while, Zia said, her eyes landing on Alara again. You must be the assistant who works with my brother. Alara nodded. Miss Arden, a pleasure. Zia glanced toward the back of the orchard where a shooting range was set up. Would you care to join me for a round, assistant? Alara understood immediately. Zia wanted to speak with her alone. She didn't refuse. Of course. At the shooting range, as they were taking aim, Zia asked, Assistant, how much does my brother pay you? Alara was loading her weapon and looked up, confused by the question. Zia fired, hitting the 9 ring. She put down her gun and looked at Alara. I'll pay you 10 times that amount if you stop my brother from marrying Seraphina Song. So that was it. Alara finally understood. She calmly steadied her weapon and fired, hitting a perfect 10. Zia looked surprised. She's that good? Alara lowered her gun. May I ask why? Because Seraphina Song is my girlfriend, Zia stated plainly. Alara was completely floored. The woman Kian almost married is his sister's girlfriend? What is going on with this family? She was silent for a long moment before she regained her composure. Not wanting to get involved in their sibling drama, she said, This matter is not under my jurisdiction. Zia gave her a knowing look. But my brother is, isn't he? Alara ignored her comment. I suggest you speak with Miss Song about this yourself. Also, the commander and Miss Song have only met twice. Their relationship is purely professional. Zia stared at her for a moment, then finally said, Thank you. Just then, the butler arrived. He's in the cockpit now. You should go see him. Not wanting to stay any longer, Alara excused herself and went to find Kian. He was sitting in the co-pilot's seat, his expression stern, completely absorbed in his work. He didn't even glance at her when she came in. She had to break the silence, explaining that Zia had invited her to the shooting range. She couldn't tell if he was listening. His long fingers kept typing, and he didn't respond. I picked a lot of etherberries just now. Would you like to try one? She asked, holding one out to him. This time he finally looked up. His gaze traveled from the berry in her delicate fingers to her lips. You ate one? Alara blinked. Just one while I was picking them. Let me try, he said, and then he kissed her. Alara never expected that let me try would mean that. He held her and kissed her for a while, her heart pounding faster and faster. By the time he pulled away, her lips were slick and glistening. She licked them. Commander, we have dinner with your family soon, and an important meeting at headquarters in 2 hours, he said nonchalantly, taking a bite of the berry in his hand. Then he turned to her and said, out of the blue, This one isn't as sweet as what's on your lips. Alara resisted the urge to punch him and ignored the comment. Thankfully, he seemed to know when to quit. After dinner, he dutifully took her to the meeting at headquarters. Things were peaceful for a while until a certain day arrived. According to his schedule, Kian visited his birth mother on Half Moon Isle once every 6 months. Today was that day. Alara accompanied him to the sanatorium on the island where his mother, Azalea, lived. The staff told them she was painting in the courtyard, so they went to find her. In the courtyard, Alara saw Azalea bent over a sketchbook. Hearing their footsteps, she looked up, her eyes meeting Alara's. It's good to see you, ma'am, she said with her usual gentle tone, handing over the items the Duke had sent. Then, to Alara's surprise, Azalea's gaze dropped to her stomach. She stared, her gaze so intense and direct that Alara felt a wave of pressure wash over her. Just then, Kian stepped in front of her, blocking Azalea's view. He shot his mother a cold glare, the clear look of a man whose territory was being encroached upon. Blocked, Azalea finally tore her eyes away from Alara. You've lost some weight, assistant, she said, her voice flat. Hearing that, Alara's tense heart relaxed a little. I'm fine. Thank you for your concern. Kian's gaze followed, his eyes sweeping over Alara as if to verify the fact for himself. Thinking she should give them some time alone, Alara said, Ma'am, I'll just go put our luggage away. Let him do it, Azalea said, frowning slightly. You stay here. But Alara, a mere assistant, would never dare order her superior around. She politely declined. Can't you even manage your own luggage? This time, Azalea addressed Kian directly. He gave his birth mother a blank look but didn't say anything. Fearing they were about to argue, Alara was about to intervene when Kian grabbed the suitcase and held out his hand for the key. Stunned, she handed it over and then watched as he actually dragged the suitcase away. A moment later, Azalea asked casually, Is it because you haven't been feeling well lately? Not wanting to give anything away, Alara just went along with it. Just a little under the weather. Thank you for your concern. A breeze swept through the courtyard and Alara turned her head, stifling a sneeze. Azalea immediately took off her own shawl and draped it over Alara's shoulders. Fearing Azalea would get cold, Alara protested, Ma'am, you shouldn't. Azalea frowned. It's windy out here. Just help me back inside. Of course, Alara said, rubbing her nose. As she was wheeling Azalea back along the winding, tree-lined path, they ran into Kian, who had just finished with the luggage. He and Alara exchanged a brief glance before she looked away, asking Azalea, What would you like for dinner? I was planning on going into the island's town later to buy some ingredients. Hearing that she was planning to cook, Azalea's expression soured again. The droids here can handle that. She looked toward Kian, her words aimed at him. The assistant is an assistant, not your maid. Kian raised an eyebrow, his own attitude just as chilly. Alara Vance is my assistant. How I manage her is my business. With that, he strode over and, as if to prevent Azalea from bossing his assistant around any further, pulled Alara to his side. He had barely taken 2 steps with Azalea's wheelchair when she hit the brakes. I can manage myself, she said coolly. I don't need you. The two of them were cut from the same stubborn cloth. Without a word, Kian let go. Acting as if he'd done nothing wrong, he pulled Alara into his arms, one hand circling her waist. He tilted his head down arrogantly. Have you lost weight? He murmured to himself. Alara felt incredibly awkward, especially being in his mother's home. Commander, please be mindful of your surroundings, she said through gritted teeth. He acted as if he hadn't heard her. It must have been when you resigned. You didn't eat properly. Let go of me, she protested. Seeing she was getting angry, he reluctantly released her. But his intense gaze remained fixed on her. He was determined to fatten his little assistant up. Suddenly, Alara pointed. Look, there's a strawberry patch in the yard. He glanced over. Artificially grown? Yes, your mother probably planted them in her spare time. I asked her earlier. She said we could pick some if we wanted. Alara led him to the patch. Nearby were some seedlings and gardening tools. Kian watched for a moment, then an urge seemed to strike him. He turned to her. Assistant, I want to try planting some. Okay, she nodded. I'll teach you. Following the method she had learned for artificial cultivation, she had him kneel and handed him a small seedling and a trowel, showing him step by step how to plant it. Half an hour later, Kian stood up, hands on his hips, and looked down at the row of strawberries he had just planted as if he were surveying a kingdom he had conquered. Alara looked at the commander's handiwork and, after a long, difficult silence, couldn't hold it in any longer. Commander, the strawberries you planted are all crooked. They look awful. His eyes narrowed instantly. Who says? Before she could answer, he pulled her over to a nearby trellis, pressed her against it, and bit open the collar of her uniform. By the time she realized what was happening, he was already hard at work on her neck. He pinned her hands behind her against the trellis, making it impossible for her to push him away. She didn't dare cry out, so she could do was whisper his name. Commander, stop it. All she could do was bite her lip, but she couldn't stop a few soft moans from escaping. More than 10 minutes later, he finally, reluctantly, pulled away. Fearing she might be unsteady, he held her waist firmly. He glanced at the masterpiece he had created on her neck, his own work looking not the least bit crooked. See? I'm very good at planting. Alara was furious. So this was about planting strawberries on my neck? He noticed she was upset. He poked her cheek. You're all puffed up. She slapped his finger away. Don't touch me. The assistant is angry again, he confirmed. I am not, she said, her face stiff. He stared at her with his dark eyes, then turned and walked back to the strawberry patch. Alara frowned, wondering what he was doing. A moment later, he returned. He stood in front of her and gently took her chin in his hand. She opened her mouth to ask what he was doing, and he popped a clean, perfect strawberry into her mouth. She took a bite. It was incredibly sweet. He gently wiped her lips with his thumb. Sweet? Very sweet, she mumbled. She stole a glance at his handsome face and felt her anger rising all over again. You look flushed, and your lips are very sweet. Alara brought a plate of strawberries and knocked on Azalea's door. Ma'am, Kian picked some strawberries and asked me to bring them to you. Azalea opened the door. He would never come in and sit. As Alara entered, her eyes were immediately drawn to a picture frame on a cabinet. It was an intimate photo of the Federation president and Azalea. Azalea showed no sign of panic. Right in front of Alara, she reached out and turned the frame face down. Please sit, she said, gesturing to a sofa. Alara sat without hesitation. Azalea looked at her. Do you know why I'm being held on this island, assistant? She hadn't expected such a direct question. She paused before answering slowly. The official records say you were convicted of attempted murder. Then I should be in the capital prison, Azalea said flatly. I was sent to this island because I was pregnant. Alara could hear the unspoken words in Azalea's statement. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Azalea finally got to the point. Did Kian force you? Alara wasn't sure how much Azalea knew and didn't dare answer recklessly. As she was trying to think of how to respond, Azalea spoke again. As his birth mother, do you really think I wouldn't know if he'd had a susceptible period? Since she was being so direct, Alara had no choice but to answer truthfully. Not exactly. It was the commander's first susceptible period, and I happened to be there. She paused, then added, the Duke immediately sealed all information about the incident, so the commander doesn't know. The answer was clearly what Azalea had expected. She didn't seem surprised, just nodded. That sounds like something the president would do. Alara frowned. So the Duke's order to cover it up came from the president? Just then, Azalea's gaze fell on her again. I just want to warn you. Some things are not as simple as they seem. If you are not certain you can control the situation, you should reconsider. Alara nodded. You saw the photo, Azalea continued. Aren't you curious about my relationship with your Federation president? If you don't wish to speak of it, ma'am, I won't ask, Alara assured her. Azalea's expression was placid, almost detached. There's nothing to hide. I was simply a tool he used and then discarded here. The words stunned Alara. It was a long moment before she could speak. Does he know? What do you think? Azalea said, as if the answer were obvious. Of course he doesn't. Azalea had been stripped of her freedom the moment Kian was born, all because of him. No wonder she treated him with such coolness. Just then Kian burst into the room, his expression tense. We have to return to the first star immediately. Planet U-47 is under attack from an outer rim fleet. I have to get back. Hearing that, Alara had no time for anything else. Ma'am, we have to go. Azalea quickly grabbed her hand and pressed something into her palm. Take this. You can have one if you feel particularly unwell. Forced to accept the medicine, Alara managed a stunned, thank you. Azalea shot Kian a cold look. Since the assistant hasn't been feeling well, don't let her go to the front lines this time. Her tone made it clear it wasn't a suggestion. Kian just raised an eyebrow and said nothing. Once they were on the shuttle and leaving Half Moon Isle, Kian sat in the co-pilot's seat, a lollipop in his mouth, thinking. He turned to Alara. That woman seemed unusually concerned about you this time. Alara cleared her throat. She's your mother, Commander. He ignored her, leaning in lazily. Are you really not feeling well? I'm fine, she said, giving a non-committal answer. He reached out and pulled her right out of her seat and into his lap. What now? She exclaimed. He didn't answer right away. He took her chin in his hand and studied her face carefully. He thought the color of her lips had deepened to a lovely peach shade. He couldn't resist leaning down and kissing her. He gently stroked her cheek. You look flushed, he praised. And your lips are very sweet. Alara raised an eyebrow. You're talking nonsense again, Commander. I am not, he said, his tone perfectly serious. All right, I get it, she said, pushing at him. You can let go now. He released her reluctantly, then, using the excuse that she had messed up his tie, had her retie it for him. He watched her nimble fingers at work. I just checked the reports, he said. The situation on U-47 isn't serious. I should be back within 3 days. Her fingers paused. I'm not accompanying you this time? He said nonchalantly. So that the next time we see that woman, she can't accuse me of mistreating you. She was just joking. Alara sighed. He clearly didn't want to talk about other people. He measured her waist with his hand and issued a stern command. Assistant, you will eat properly for the next few days. I'll be checking when I get back. A small smile touched her lips. Seeing that she wasn't taking him seriously, he put on his superior voice and gave her a sharp nip on the neck. Did you hear me, assistant? Not to be outdone, she grabbed his face and bit his lip in return. And you will be careful on the front lines, Commander. When you get back, I will be checking for any new wounds. He narrowed his eyes, clearly enjoying being bossed around by her. He lifted his chin arrogantly. Acceptable. Then he leaned down and kissed her again. Back on the first star, for the first time, Alara did not deploy with the fleet. She watched Kian's ships depart from Central Command, then went straight to the military hospital to work. The first couple of days were normal, but then her morning sickness became more frequent, so she went home to rest. She had been sleeping a lot lately. That afternoon, after looking over some files on the sofa, she drifted off. She was woken by a sudden call from Kian. She fumbled with the screen and answered, her ear meeting his deep voice. "Assistant, let me see your face." She snapped awake and realized her finger was covering the camera. She slowly moved it away, and her sleepy, flushed face appeared on the screen. She saw his handsome, though slightly blurry face on the screen. He was still in his crisp uniform. "Commander, are you on your way back?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said with a completely straight face, "I want to kiss you." She immediately blushed. "I'm hanging up." He reluctantly gave up on that idea. "Assistant, do you want to see me?" She was a little confused. "I am seeing you, aren't I?" The moment she said that, the video feed flipped, going dark for a second. Then her eyes went wide. Kian's tail was swaying in front of the camera. It gently brushed against the lens, mimicking a touch to her nose, then her lips, then her chin. Alara squeezed her eyes shut. "This is unbearable. He's going to be the death of me." "Commander," she managed to ask, "why is your tail out?" "It just popped out the moment I saw you," he said. A bright smile lit up his face. "It missed you too." Her finger trembled and her composure finally broke. She hung up, terrified of what other insane things he might say.